And now, we jump to our 8th storyline, where our narrator makes a startling confession. I was reincarnated as a sword. For hundreds of years, it was passed from master to master, a legendary blade that forged mere mortals into historical heroes. But then it met someone different, not a master, but a true comrade. His name was Leon Burke, a boy from a nameless village with an unshakable will, who wielded the sword against werewolves and the undead. He cut a bloody path through hordes of monsters, and together they roamed the world. Their bond was so strong they achieved feats no one else could ever hope to match. But even legends face their limit. In a brutal, world-shaking battle, Leon Burke is pushed past his breaking point and is left kneeling in the frozen wastes, battered and broken. Their final foe was a colossal dragon, a creature of pure, overwhelming malice. Its roar shook the very mountains. But even facing impossible odds, Leon Burke's spirit refused to break. The beast unleashed a torrent of destructive energy, but the warrior met the cataclysmic blast head-on, his own power erupting in defiance. With a grin that stared down death itself, he spoke to his partner. "Let's go, my friend." He poured every last ounce of his strength into one final charge. Man and sword clashed against the beast in a battle of wills. And finally, soaring through the air, they went for the decisive blow. The sword recalls their greatest victory, the day they defeated the White Dragon of the Frost Mountains. After their legendary battles, my comrade Leon Burke became the ruler of a kingdom. And I, the sword, became a symbol of that legend, and was passed down through Leon Burke's bloodline, with his final wish that I protect his descendants. But after a long slumber, the sword is awakened by a commotion. It's being shaken, and it is not happy about it. An arrogant young prince declares himself the new master of the legendary blade. His guards panic, pleading with him to return the sacred sword. A prince? But the spoiled brat refuses, and the sword can only think one thing. This pig? It can't believe this is what has become of its master's lineage. To be sure, the sword uses its unique ability, authority, judgment, to assess its new master. And the results are pathetic. The prince, Adrian Leon Burke, has zero aptitude and a list of traits that reads like a character sheet for a pig. Adrian can barely lift the legendary blade, already dreaming of how the king and nobles will finally have to acknowledge him. He seethes. "They won't be able to ignore me anymore." The sword is utterly unimpressed, thinking what a ridiculous man this is. Adrian screams for the great dragon slayer to lend him its strength, but the sword internally scoffs. "Why would I ever lend power to a guy like you?" He bellows the sword's true name, Gruhorn. He begins swinging the blade wildly, completely out of control as his terrified guards beg him to stop. But the spoiled prince turns on them, threatening to kill them for daring to give him orders. "Once I get my hands on Gruhorn's power," he rages, "trash like you will be nothing." But his weak body can't handle the legendary weapon's weight, and he stumbles forward. He loses his balance completely, and to the horror of his attendants, he falls directly onto the blade. A maid gasps in shock. The prince lies in a pool of his own blood as the guards panic, screaming for the royal physician. But from Gruhorn's perspective, something is very wrong. It realizes, wait, the one who got stabbed by this scoundrel was me? Its vision blurs, and for the first time in its existence, the legendary sword feels itself about to faint. As it fades, Gruhorn reflects on the grim future the kingdom faced. If Prince Adrian succeeded the throne, there was no hope. He had no talent, only top-tier arrogance and greed. He was a stupid, lazy, and cruel pig. That was the true nature of the first prince, Adrian Leon Burke. He was a dark cloud over the kingdom. But after this accident left him on the border of death, a strange rumor began to spread. The rumor spreads through the castle staff, with maids whispering about Prince Adrian's sudden change. He hasn't been flipping tables or hanging out with his usual gang of delinquents. But their concern is just a facade for mockery. They sneer that the notorious prince must finally feel some shame, or more likely, he's just scared and will be back to his old self soon enough. However, the person in question, Prince Adrian, has no interest in such rumors. He's dealing with a much bigger problem. Because the soul inside this body isn't Adrian's, it's Gruhorn, the legendary sword, who realizes in horror, to think I killed my comrade's descendant and stole his body. His existential crisis is interrupted when a maid bursts in, announcing that His Majesty the King has arrived. But Gruhorn, still thinking like a sword, scoffs, The man didn't even visit when I was dying. Why now? The maid panics, trying to shush him as a stern, imposing figure enters the room. The man, an older warrior with white hair, looks down at the prince. I heard you came back from the dead, he says coldly, but it seems that temper of yours is exactly the same. He dismisses the maid, leaving him alone with the boy slumped in the chair. Gruhorn looks up, completely bewildered, thinking, who is this? The man continues, we still have the bond of master and student, yet you won't even pretend to know me now? Gruhorn's face twists in disgust. Is he this pig's teacher? He thinks, his internal contempt completely at odds with the confused maid calling out to him. Thinking fast, Gruhorn feigns amnesia. My memory is a mess. Don't tell me? Just then, a new, far more imposing figure arrives, announced by the guards. His Majesty the King has arrived. Gruhorn internally scoffs. Then he must be this scoundrel's father. But as he looks closer, he's genuinely surprised. Oh, he's better than I thought. He'd assumed that after so many generations, the lion's blood had diluted into dog's blood. But the king's powerful presence proves him wrong. The king glares down at his son. It seems surviving an encounter with death does not change a person. Adrian's teacher quickly steps in, using Gruhorn's excuse. Your Majesty, I've just heard his memory is not intact. The court erupts in panic, demanding the royal physician be summoned immediately. And so, Gruhorn is forced to play patient as the physician examines him. The old doctor looks perplexed. I can find no abnormalities whatsoever in His Highness's body. However, he concludes, it's possible this is a temporary condition caused by mental shock. Gruhorn freezes, wondering if the king has seen through his ruse. The king scoffs. How truly convenient. Does this mean, he sneers, that everything you have done until now never happened? The king lectures him, saying that people can learn from their mistakes and grow. But you, he roars, his face twisting with rage, have forgotten all of that. He looms over the prince, accusing him of taking no steps forward from his past errors. And you will not be able to move forward in the future either. A guard tries to calm the furious monarch, but Gruhorn knows he's in deep trouble. Internally, he curses his luck. Forget being treated like a prince, he thinks. I won't even be treated like a human. He grits his teeth in frustration, wondering what on earth the original Adrian did to be so despised. Suddenly, a voice calls out a name. Ian! Gruhorn whips his head around in shock. A woman wearing a crown rushes in, smothering Gruhorn in a bone-crushing hug and declaring she heard everything. As he struggles for air, she dismisses his past as trivial if he can't even remember it. She cups his chubby cheeks, lamenting how his beautiful face has wasted away, much to Gruhorn's internal confusion. But with a gentle smile, she says she's just happy that he's opened his eyes. She warns him to never again touch dangerous objects like the sword. As she frets, Gruhorn's guilt resurfaces. I'm sorry, he thinks, but your son is already dead. Later that night, the sheer weight of his new reality feels incredibly burdensome. The queen finally leaves, telling him to rest. Gruhorn slumps in his chair, completely drained. He lets out a single weary sigh. The promise he made to his old comrade echoes in his mind. He was meant to protect Leon Burke's descendants, but instead, he feels he has become one's killer. But his despair quickly hardens into resolve. What's done is done, he thinks. I'll just have to live well enough for the both of us. As a legendary sword, he spent his entire existence cleaning up after others. This new body may be fat and talentless, but that doesn't matter. He just needs to build his power again. With a smirk, he remembers his past. Do you know how many heroes I've raised? His first step is clear. He needs to forge a mana heart. He sits and begins to gather the ambient mana, but the energy swirls uncontrollably before fizzling out. He breaks out in a cold sweat. The mana dispersed. This pathetic body can't handle it. But Gruhorn is no stranger to adversity. He grits his teeth and tries again and again. With a guttural roar, he pours every ounce of his will into the attempt. He forces the mana to bend to his command once more. But again, the energy violently rejects him, slamming him to the floor. Gasping for air, he can't believe it. What the hell kind of body is this? He laments that in his original form, he could have easily forced this weak constitution into submission. Just then, his attendant maid enters the room. She presents a restorative medicine sent by the queen, explaining that it will aid his recovery. She gently pleads with him to consider his mother's feelings. The maid nervously recalls the last time she tried this, when the spoiled prince threw the bowl right at her head. But as Gruhorn stares at the steaming cup, his eyes widen in shock at what he sees within it. This medicine, it contains mana. Without a word, he snatches the cup from the tray and downs the entire thing in one gulp. The maid is left speechless. He slams the empty bowl down and coldly tells her to leave. As she scurries away, Gruhorn prepares to try again. He immediately begins channeling the new energy, attempting to forge the mana heart once more. He realizes the medicine is working. But the amount of mana is still far too small, creating a fragile core that will dissipate within a day. Realizing he needs more, he calls out to the terrified maid just as she's about to leave. "Do you have any more of that?" he demands, his voice cold and urgent. A few days later, having consumed all the mana-infused medicine he could get his hands on, he grins with wicked anticipation. "Finally, I can create a mana heart," he declares, the power surging around him. He's done this countless times before, a process so familiar he could do it with his eyes closed. But he's cut short by a wave of excruciating pain. His insides feel like they're on fire, his chest about to explode. And then he remembers. Forging a mana heart was always an agonizing process. He grits his teeth, fighting to stay conscious through the torment. He knows that if he passes out, he'll suffer a catastrophic mana backflow. He has to focus! He seizes the wild clump of energy, reminding himself to go slowly, guiding it carefully along the path to his heart. He lets the new heart permeate his being, taking form within him. The chaotic energy finally begins to settle. And just like that, it's done. This time it's not a mana heart he's forged for someone else. It's a mana heart for him and him alone. He did it, it's complete. He jumps to his feet, celebrating his new power, but his cheer is cut short. Huh? A system window pops up confirming his success, but Gruhorn recognizes this interface. Is this a status window? It's identical to the messages he used to send his masters when he was a sword. Why is it appearing for him now? Before he can process it, a new message appears, restoring connection to the origin. Suddenly, he's bombarded with notifications. The connection is unstable. Most of his authorities are locked, but a few are available for limited use, like the power of judgment. He also gains limited access to third eye and third ear, which let him see and hear better. Authority, he thinks to himself, looking out the window to test his new senses. And it's true. The leaves on the trees are sharper, more defined than ever before. He then focuses on his hearing. And he can clearly hear the maids gossiping outside his room, amazed that the prince hasn't thrown a tantrum yet. But as he listens in, a sudden sharp jolt hits him. A system window flashes before his eyes. His internal mana has been completely depleted, and his authorities are being forcibly terminated. He stumbles back, clutching his head. "So this is what extremely limited meant," he groans. He remembers his time as a sword, when he could sense everything in all directions without a single blind spot. But that absolute perception is gone now. With his pathetic new mana pool, all he can do is eavesdrop a little or see things slightly better. But a wicked grin spreads across his face. He knows things will change once he expands his mana. For now, though, a more pressing human need arises. He's hungry. A maid promises to bring food immediately, and Gruhorn decides his first priority is adapting to this new body. Suddenly the queen appears, her face beaming with admiration. She pinches his cheeks, overjoyed that he finished all his medicine and is finally learning to treasure his own body. But their moment is cut short by a looming shadow as the king enters the room. The king presents a stern, scarred man asking if Adrian recognizes him. Gruhorn, maintaining his ruse, simply says no. The queen, convinced of his amnesia, turns to the man and reveals he is her brother, pleading for him to help his nephew. Gruhorn internally notes that this man is his new uncle, as the queen continues to press him. But the uncle scoffs, callously remarking that Adrian's past wasn't worth remembering anyway, a sentiment Gruhorn immediately picks up on. The uncle then lays down his terms. The only help he's willing to offer is to whip this pathetic, flabby body into shape. He makes it clear there will be no special treatment, a condition the queen gratefully accepts. And with that, the deal is struck. The very next moment, the uncle kicks Adrian clean across the training grounds. Looming over him, the uncle lays out the brutal new rules. Every single action, even breathing, now requires his permission. The life of a prince is officially over. With a condescending smirk, the uncle dangles a pathetic reward. If Adrian tries hard enough, He might teach him a scrap of the family's swordsmanship. Gruhorn is internally incandescent with rage. This man dares offer to teach swordsmanship to him, the legendary blade who trained the founding king? The uncle mistakes his trembling fury for simple, powerless resentment. But Gruhorn rises, his face shadowed with resolve. He looks his uncle in the eye and proposes a bet. Within half a year, he declares, I will make you acknowledge me. If he fails, he'll be his uncle's dog. But if he succeeds, the uncle must grant him a single wish. Intrigued by this sudden spine, the uncle agrees, figuring it'll at least be entertaining to watch him try. Gruhorn may have talked a big game, but the crushing reality of Adrian's pathetic, stamina-less body immediately sets in. Realizing physical training alone won't cut it, Gruhorn decides to cheat, using mana to burn the fat off his body. The sudden surge of energy doesn't go unnoticed. In a flash, the uncle grabs him, his hand crackling with power. He roars in disbelief. Did you actually create a mana heart? Gruhorn just gives him a smug little grin. He casually confirms it, then taunts his uncle, asking if he's already regretting their bet. But the uncle isn't impressed. He's furious. He demands to know where a pampered prince learned such a technique, seething that Adrian doesn't even realize his mistake. Gruhorn is genuinely confused. Because a mana heart, his uncle explains, is a crude, inefficient technique used only by low-level mercenaries. For the legendary sword Gruhorn, this is a world-shattering revelation. He realizes it truly is the end of an era. The uncle hammers the point home, sneering that a mana heart is a crude technique for low-level grunts. Gruhorn stammers in disbelief, but his uncle decides showing is better than telling. Watch closely, he commands, gathering a brilliant blue energy in his hand. Gruhorn's eyes widen as he sees the mana form not a core, but a ring. The uncle unleashes a stable, powerful torrent of energy. He explains that these mana chains are not only more stable, but have the power to shatter the sword energy of a mana heart. He even gives a history lesson, explaining that an entire family who clung to the old ways fell into ruin 100 years ago. Nobody uses mana hearts anymore. Humbled, Gruhorn hits the books, studying mana chain basic theory, and grimly accepting how much the times have changed. He learns that while swordsmen now use chains, mages have evolved to use circles. His studies reveal that knights now weave these chains to gather mana, with their power level determined by the number of chains they can create. The stages of power are clearly defined: single, double, triple, quad, and the legendary pentachain. Gruhorn slams the book shut, begrudgingly admitting that the theory isn't completely nonsensical garbage. But as he scans the authors, one name catches his eye: Ernest Altringen. The name triggers a memory from a very long time ago, when a voice challenged him in his original sword form. A hooded challenger named Ernest Altringen appeared, declaring he had come to see who was more worthy of the title Sword Saint. Back in the present, a smirk plays on Gruhorn's lips. No wonder the name sounded familiar. He chuckles to himself, wondering whatever happened to that ambitious upstart. The next day, it's time for practical application as Gruhorn begins his physical training. His uncle's voice cuts through the morning air, asking if he actually read the book. You must have grasped the situation by now, he sneers. Just how foolish a choice you have made. But Gruhorn just smirks. Well, I don't feel like I made a mistake in the slightest. The uncle's patience wears thin. Are you in denial, or have you still not grasped the situation? A blue flame ignites in Gruhorn's hand. Not all mana hearts are the same, you see. His entire body erupts in a brilliant blue aura as he asks, Have you ever heard of a difference in class? The uncle is taken aback. I wondered what nonsense you were spouting. He scoffs, comparing Gruhorn to delusional mercenaries who think they're ancient heroes. Do you know what happened to all of them? They all fell, he declares, unable to surpass even 2 rings. The challenge is thrown down. If you are different from them, try defeating a double chain knight. Then I will become your guardian, the uncle says with a grim smile, as your mother wishes. Gruhorn smirks, wondering if this is really a good thing for him. The air in the training yard grows heavy with tension. Taking a heavy step forward, the uncle's voice drops. Did you just question my qualifications as a guardian? A terrifying teal aura explodes around him. I am a Count of the Kingdom and the commander of the Northern Army, master of the Black Lancers, and one of the 5 silver lions who serve His Majesty. The ground shatters under the sheer pressure of his mana as he reveals he is one who has woven 4 rings. A quad chain knight. "Vale Balorhard!" he roars. "That is the name of the man who may stand behind you." Gruhorn is blasted back by the immense power as Vale demands, "Is that sufficient qualification?" But just as his blade descends, two royal knights intercept the blow, demanding that Count Balorhard stand down. Vale simply smirks, unfazed by the interruption. But Gruhorn, with a defiant grin, accepts the challenge, shouting for his uncle not to dare go back on his word. A short while later, the first day of training ends with Gruhorn utterly defeated and gasping on the floor. He lurches up in a panic, the grim reality setting in. He nearly died. Vale looms over him, mocking his foolish grit and sneering that he'd be lucky to beat a single chain knight, let alone a double. Fuming, Gruhorn stumbles away from the training grounds, cursing that devilish bastard. He finally reaches his room, only to find someone waiting for him inside. It's the royal physician, who seems pleasantly surprised that the prince with amnesia still remembers him. Gruhorn demands to know why he's here, and the physician explains the queen ordered him to use healing magic. But as the physician prepares to cast the spell, Gruhorn panics. He physically shoves the old man out of his room, screaming that he doesn't need it. Healing magic would make all the agonizing training he just endured completely worthless. But his troubles are far from over, as a voice calls out from the doorway. A smug-looking young man in a red coat enters the room. Later at dinner, Gruhorn eyes the newcomer warily as he tastes his soup. Something about this guy just feels off. A knight leans in to whisper that the guest is His Highness, the Third Prince. The Third Prince remarks that he heard about Adrian's accident, adding with a smirk, "What a shame." Unimpressed, Gruhorn cuts straight to the point. "So what is it you want to say? Did you just come to pick a fight?" The Third Prince's eyes flash with malice. "Says the fool who stuck a sword into his own body." He leans back, a smug look on his face. "Besides, I heard an interesting piece of news, you see." This gets Gruhorn's attention. The prince reveals he knows about the bet with Count Balorhard, the one about dueling a double-chain knight. A wicked smile spreads across his face. "About that?" He lunges forward, getting right in Gruhorn's personal space. "How would you like me as your opponent?" The Third Prince is gone, leaving Gruhorn sitting in stunned silence. He seethes internally. What the hell was that guy just now? Why are Leonberg's descendants all like this? The knight behind him explains that His Highness, Third Prince Gillian, has been a renowned prodigy since childhood. In fact, he became a double-chain knight at the age of 14, a true genius with mana chains. Just as Gruhorn is processing this new threat, a nervous maid interrupts. She's trembling under the weight of two massive stacks of letters, all for him. He takes one, confused. Letters? Why would anyone who ignored this body before suddenly... He quickly realizes they're all duel requests from knights and swordsmen offering to be his sparring partner. The news of his bet has spread, and every person who ever held a grudge against the arrogant prince sees this as a golden opportunity to legally beat him to a pulp. But instead of fear, a wicked grin spreads across Gruhorn's face. Looks like I've become an easy target. He grabs a handful of the letters and calls out to the startled maid. With a glint in his eye, he gives a simple order. Write down all their names. The next day, on the training grounds, a wooden sword clatters onto the stone floor. His Uncle Vale stands over him, his voice like ice. Pick up the sword. You need to know at least a shred of swordsmanship for the bet to stand, Vale says coldly. I don't want excuses that you lost because you weren't taught the basics. Gruhorn struggles to pick up his sword, muttering about his uncle's awful personality. But as he tries to stand, a wave of agony shoots through him. My muscle pain! He cries out, before suddenly stopping. Vale grabs his shoulder, a hint of confusion in his eyes. Did you not receive healing magic? He leans in, his gaze sharp. If you're a knight, you should know well. Healing magic only restores muscles to their original state, he explains. It doesn't help them grow. The realization hits Gruhorn. Right. Vale turns away, dismissing the subject. Well, fine. That wasn't what I intended to talk about anyway. He raises his own sword, his voice dropping to a serious tone. I don't plan on showing this multiple times, so watch closely. A powerful teal aura explodes around him as he demonstrates the foundational technique. The kingdom's training sword. He unleashes a flurry of precise, powerful strikes, his blade a blur of teal energy. He moves with a speed and grace that defies belief. every motion a masterclass in swordsmanship. This is the foundation upon which all knights of the kingdom are built. With a final decisive downward slash, the basic technique sends a shockwave cracking through the stone floor. Gruhorn is utterly speechless. He stammers. Just now, did you say that's the sword style knights learn to build their foundation? Vale scoffs. It may lack sharpness since it's a training sword, but it is faithful to the basics. Considering your talent, it might even be too much for you. But Gruhorn isn't insulted, he's ecstatic. No matter how much time has passed, the great dragon slayer swordsmanship that beheaded the mad dragon is now treated as nothing more than a trivial training technique. Vale tells him that mastering the basics won't be enough to win the bet, suggesting he find a new teacher, but Gruhorn cuts him off. There is no need. I will not learn any other swordsmanship, he declares, because this alone is enough. Vale seems taken aback for a moment, then simply says, do as you please. With renewed purpose, Gruhorn throws himself back into his training. As he swings the heavy blade, a grim realization dawns on him. The fact that the legendary Dragon Slayer style is now considered basic is, he hates to admit, a natural evolution. He understands now. The current swordsmanship lacks the most crucial component, the will to slay dragons. Those who abandoned the mana heart and forgot how to imbue their very will into the blade could never recognize the true value of the Dragon Slayer style. But his swing is clumsy and weak. Vale stops him mid-motion. Power doesn't go into the sword just because you tense your arms, he scolds. Have you already forgotten what I showed you? He smacks Gruhorn's gut with the training sword, reminding him to focus his power in the belly. And then the legs. You must channel strength correctly through your whole body to wield the sword, Vale explains. Right. He knows that in his current weak body, he's just clumsily mimicking a fake Dragon Slayer style. But he will prove that the true style isn't some old junk to be thrown away like worn-out shoes. And so 1 day, 2 days, 3 days pass. A week passes in a blur of relentless training. And then a month with Gruhorn dedicating every moment to honing his new body and channeling his mana. Finally, his arduous efforts bear fruit. System notifications confirm his transformation. His morbid obesity is reduced, his metabolism is boosted, and the crippling clumsy trait has vanished entirely. But the most crucial change comes from his mana, which has fundamentally altered his constitution. The mana sensitivity disorder is gone, replaced by a new, powerful sensitivity, allowing him to swing his sword more naturally than ever before. Every day he pushes himself, becoming stronger than the day before. He's completely lost in the zone, ignoring a voice telling him to stop, striving for a swing more perfect than the last. His training partner screams in frustration, his own wooden sword shattered. Did you not hear me tell you to stop? The sheer force of Gruhorn's swing completely obliterated the knight's blade. Drenched in the pouring rain, Gruhorn stands over his defeated partner, his uncle Vale Balorhard watching from the background. His hand is bleeding, raw from the force of his own power. He finally snaps out of his trance, noticing his uncle's presence. Uncle? But Vale's arrival doesn't stop him. He turns his relentless assault on a training dummy, smashing it to splinters with pure, focused power. The world comes rushing back. Vale grabs him, absolutely furious. You stupid fool, training on a day like this? If that were a real sword, you wouldn't have escaped unscathed. Gruhorn looks at his own trembling, bloodied hands, realizing just how far he pushed himself. But his reckless dedication pays off. A system notification announces he's awakened from his extreme concentration and gained a new trait, hyper-focus. A slow, triumphant laugh escapes his lips. All the pain was worth it. He even jokes that if he tries to focus like that again, he might just get struck by lightning. As a knight rushes to his side in a panic, Gruhorn's body finally gives out. For a moment, the fury on Vale's face softens into something else. Concern. He catches the boy as he collapses, muttering, "Foolish brat." Sometime later, Gruhorn awakens in his bed, wondering if he passed out. He clutches his head, realizing he still doesn't understand the limits of this new human body. As a sword, he had achieved everything. Nameless war hero, swordmaster, mercenary king, even founder of the kingdom. He led wars to victory, elevated the souls of his wielders, and guided the path of countless heroes. He was Gruhorn, the legendary blade, a wise advisor and an excellent teacher. But as he looks at his own two hands, he realizes he was always just a third party, an observer. He pushed himself to the brink, intoxicated by the feeling of every drop of sweat and every ounce of effort being entirely his own. But he knows this weak body can't keep up with his legendary spirit. He needs to find a balance. A month after forming his mana heart, he sits down to meditate, ready to take the next step. He closes his eyes and concentrates, and his consistent effort pays off as a notification confirms his body can now withstand more mana. His mana heart expands. The power flows through him. His entire physical constitution is altered by the change, and with this evolution, he can now use the most basic level of aura. He grips a sword, its blade glowing with his new power, and thinks, "With this, I can handle the basics." In the training yard, Vale confronts Gruhorn, telling him that rumors are spreading throughout the kingdom. He grits his teeth, complaining that his nephew's ridiculous bet has become a major headache for him. "Wouldn't it be better to just find a dual opponent quickly?" he asks, but Gruhorn seems unconcerned. "Because as for his opponent," he smirks, revealing, "I have already decided who it will be." Changing the subject, he suggests warming up with some single-chain knights first, to which his uncle indifferently agrees. Gruhorn then turns to a knight in ornate armor, calling out to a man named Carl. Carl bows, presenting a scroll. "Yes, Your Highness. This is the list of those who sent duel requests." As Gruhorn takes the list, Carl asks cautiously if he really plans to duel them. The knight warns him that most of the challengers hold a grudge and will use the duel as an excuse to harm him. Gruhorn smirks, completely unfazed. "I know that," he says. "That is why—" He turns to his uncle with a chilling request. "You must referee for me." He clarifies that he's not asking for much, just for Vale to prevent anyone from dying during the duel, implying he's the one who might go too far. A few days later, on the day of the first duel, a nervous young man arrives, sweating bullets. He stares up at the opulent palace, his thoughts dripping with contempt for the scoundrel who lives inside. This is Taylor Tailheim, the second son of a minor baron, and he's here for revenge. A flashback reveals the source of his grudge. Years ago, the original Prince Adrian publicly mocked his family at a royal banquet. The cruel prince humiliated Taylor's father and brother in front of the entire court, calling them country bumpkins. The insult destroyed his family's honor, and his eyes burn with hatred as he remembers the name, Adrian Leon Burke. Now, standing before the prince, he vows to make him pay dearly as he offers a formal greeting. Taylor formally introduces himself as a single-chain apprentice knight, but Gruhorn just scoffs at his seriousness. He then openly mocks Taylor, questioning if he's even a real knight because he looks so weak. Taylor seethes, his anger confirming every rumor he's heard about the rude, arrogant prince. But before his rage can boil over, Vale Balorhard steps in, ordering him to retract his spirit. Taylor's fury instantly vanishes, replaced by starstruck awe as he recognizes the legendary Lord Balorhard. He bows deeply, declaring it an incredible honor, to which Vale gives a curt reply. Gruhorn dryly observes that Taylor seems to think his uncle is the prince. Vale shoots back that if he wanted respect, he should have behaved better in the past, earning a grumble from his nephew. With the pleasantries over, Vale takes his position as referee and announces the start of the duel. The two opponents lock eyes, the battle for honor and revenge about to begin. Taylor Tailheim wastes no time, channeling his mana into his blade. With a look of grim determination, he gives a final, formal warning. And with a cry to be careful, he explodes forward, launching the first attack. He closes the distance in an instant, sword raised for a decisive strike. But Gruhorn just smirks, unimpressed, critiquing his opponent's form as having too many useless movements. He meets the attack head-on, and their blades collide with a flash of light. Taylor is stunned, realizing the raw power he just hit wasn't a technique, but a pure mana heart. The force of Gruhorn's simple block is so immense it shatters the ground beneath them. Stumbling back, Taylor's mind races in disbelief. A basic mana heart should never be able to stop a mana chain. Gruhorn, however, looks completely bored, casually remarking that the powerful blow just felt a bit tingly. Taylor is utterly bewildered. The spectating knights are just as shocked, with one noticing a strange sound coming from Taylor's sword. Even the legendary Vale Balorhard recognizes the phenomenon with a start. It's sword resonance. As Taylor's own blade hums with power, his mind refuses to accept it. "It can't be!" he roars, charging forward in a desperate mana-fueled frenzy. Their swords meet again in a blinding flash of steel. Taylor unleashes a furious barrage of attacks, but Gruhorn parries each blow with contemptuous ease. The exchange ends, leaving Taylor breathless and his opponent looking bored. Gruhorn muses to himself that the old saying is true. Ring mana and heart mana are completely incompatible. He clutches his chest, admitting with a grim smile that he feels like a dangerous mana backflow could happen at any moment. But then a wicked grin spreads across his face as he asks, "However, did you say you were the second son of Baron Teilheim?" With a condescending smirk, Gruhorn raises his sword and tells the boy, "You need to cool your head a bit." He closes his eyes, focusing his senses. In his mind's eye, he sees the old, overweight body of Prince Adrian floating in a deep, silent void. His consciousness reaches out, his eyes snapping open as he commands his very soul to awaken. He recalls his true nature as a legendary blade, a weapon called both Demon Sword and Holy Sword. He taps into the countless names and legends that are all part of his soul. And his mana heart accepts that colossal will, awakening the dormant will to slay dragons. The memory of the sword's last battle floods his mind, imbuing him with the essence crafted to slay dragons. A system window confirms it. The Dragon Slayer's heart has been activated. Forged for the sole purpose of slaying dragons, a colossal crimson aura erupts from Gruhorn's body. The system confirms it. The energy from his new heart has merged with his sword, unleashing its true, terrifying power. Taylor can only tremble in abject terror, unable to comprehend the monstrous presence before him. Sensing the overwhelming killing intent, Vale Balorhard roars for the duel to stop. But it's too late. With a glowing crimson eye, Gruhorn unleashes his attack. A flashback reveals a conversation before the duel, where Gruhorn asked his uncle for a single favor. With a chilling smirk, he asked, "If it looks like I'm about to kill my opponent, then you must be the one to stop me, uncle." Back in the present, Vale makes good on that promise, intercepting the fatal blow with his own power in a cataclysmic explosion of energy that shatters the ground beneath them. As the dust settles, Vale stands firm, his spear still crackling with immense power. The force of the blast sent Gruhorn flying, slamming him against the shattered courtyard wall. Seeing the prince struck down, the royal knights immediately draw their blades on Vale. They surround him, accusing him of an unforgivable crime. "Count Balorhard, what have you done? This could be considered regicide." But Gruhorn struggles to his feet, ordering them to stand back. I asked him to do it. Wiping a trickle of blood from his lip, he clarifies, "I did ask him, but I never said to knock me out," leaving the knights utterly bewildered. The impact of his uncle's attack reverberated deep within him, right to his very core. Clutching his chest, he thinks, "I thought my mana heart was actually going to crack. Uncle's power is on a completely different level, and I took a direct hit from that." He checks his mana heart, relieved. Fortunately, there don't seem to be any lasting side effects. But his relief quickly turns to a triumphant grin. Well, it all worked out in the end. I won the duel after all. His celebration is cut short by a stern voice from the doorway. "What are you smiling about?" It's his uncle, Vale Balorhard, who has come to his room demanding answers. "What on earth did you do?" Vale explodes with fury. "What was that unrighteous sword? I never taught you such a style." But Gruhorn's gaze is cold and steady. "I was merely faithful to the essence of the sword." Vale scoffs at the boy's arrogance. Talking about the essence of the sword when you've never even seen real combat. He recalls the terrifying blood-red aura from the duel. So the essence of the sword, as you conceive it, is killing intent. Then, to Gruhorn's surprise, Vale's anger subsides into a grim acceptance. While it is flagrant and uncomfortable, it is also a truth. Gruhorn is stunned into silence. That was not the reaction he was expecting. Gruhorn smirks. "I thought you'd drone on about how the path of the sword is the perfection of the sword itself." But Vale's philosophy is far more pragmatic. "I am a soldier, not a knight. I am one who walks the path of victory, rather than the path of righteousness." He looks down at the prince. "However, your sword goes too far. If your killing intent is excessive, you will fail to distinguish friend from foe." Gruhorn just retorts, "And that's why you're kicking up all this fuss, right? To fix it." Vale crosses his arms, his gaze intense. "I will watch you. I will see if you are consumed by your inner demon or not." 3 days of grueling practice duels come to an end. Gruhorn faces his first challenger one last time. "You said your name was Taylor Teilheim?" With a surprisingly friendly smile, he says, "Good work over the last 3 days." But for Taylor, it was hell. For 3 whole days, he had to block a sword overflowing with pure, uncontrolled killing intent. Gruhorn leans in with a taunting smirk. But it's a shame, isn't it? You would have felt better if you could have at least kicked my ass once, but you couldn't. He then turns to a nearby maid, his tone shifting to one of command. Bring that here. The maid presents an ornate wooden chest, looking confused. Your Highness? What is this? As a memory of the original Prince Adrian's cruelty flashes by, Gruhorn explains, I heard I did some terrible things to you in the past. I don't know if this will make up for it. He hands the chest to the stunned tailor. But take this to Baron Tailheim. It's not much, just some gold and a letter. As Taylor walks away in a daze, Gruhorn watches him go. Now go on. Travel safely. Gruhorn thinks to himself that while he's not obligated to clean up the original prince's messes, a man should be paid for his work. News of the duel spreads like wildfire, and the kingdom's gossips are certain. The arrogant prince has finally dug his own grave. Courtiers and servants alike whisper with glee, eagerly anticipating the humiliation he's sure to suffer. However, days pass and the expected news never comes. Instead, a bewildered tailor is asked by his peers, Oh, you're asking how the duel went? But to their shock, Taylor and his friends only have glowing praise for the prince, calling it all a simple misunderstanding. The court gossips are left reeling, immediately jumping to the only conclusion they can think of. The royal family must have silenced him. And when Gruhorn hears this new twisted version of events, he absolutely loses it. He fumes that Taylor is only quiet because he's embarrassed about losing so badly. As he rants about the useless nobles, his Uncle Vale dryly points out the hypocrisy. So with his next challenger, Gruhorn tries a new tactic. After paying him off, he leans in with a menacing glare and orders the young man to spread the word about the duel's outcome. Pleased with his direct approach, Gruhorn smugly assumes the problem is solved. But his satisfaction is short-lived. A nervous maid informs him that his intimidation tactics have backfired spectacularly, sparking a new rumor that he's threatening people to fake his victories. Completely fed up with the court's gossip, Gruhorn decides to forget the rumors and focus on what he does best, training. He channels all his frustration into his sword, pushing himself relentlessly. Day after day he trains. His power grows and his resolve hardens. Having worked his way through the list of challengers, he asks Carl how many are left. Gruhorn sighs, bored. Apprentice knights aren't enough for me anymore. But Carl clarifies that this last opponent is a knight who has properly learned the sword. This isn't just some noble heir, but a true talent who joined a knighthood to train. A wicked grin spreads across Gruhorn's face as he learns the name, Arwen Kyrgyzstan, a probation knight of the Iron Lion Knights. The day of the duel arrives. The royal knights gossip, spotting the Iron Lion emblem on the challenger's armor and confirming her identity. She is known by many names, the Flower of the Cliff, the Thorny Rose, the one who broke the hearts of all men. They can't believe such a great beauty would challenge the prince, joking that it must be a testament to his newfound ability. But Arwen is focused. The knights wonder aloud if the prince is about to be thoroughly humiliated by her. After all, the Iron Lion Knights are one of the most renowned and skilled orders in the entire kingdom. And Arwen Kyrgyzstan is a promising talent whose official membership is already a done deal. Gruhorn is genuinely confused, asking Carl, why would a genius like that come seeking a duel with me? Carl nervously explains there was a slight misunderstanding in the past, but Gruhorn knows better. Misunderstanding, my foot. Knowing the old me, I probably just picked a fight. He grabs a nearby maid and demands answers. You tell me, what did I do back then? The maid stammers nervously. She finally blurts it out. You harassed Sir Arwen. The secondhand embarrassment is too much. Gruhorn clutches his head, screaming at the memory of the original prince. You crazy bastard! A flashback reveals the cringe-inducing moment, with the original obese Prince Adrian creepily offering Arwen a position as his personal maid. She immediately slaps his hand away. Arwen coldly informs him that knights are not his private property, and the prince's face twists in rage. He throws a full-blown tantrum, screaming insults at her. The maid finishes her story, leaving Gruhorn to stew in the mortifying details. He can only grimace, disgusted by what he calls the twisted courtship of a rotten scoundrel. He scoffs internally. After all, no sane person would ever call Arwen ugly. Arwen offers a formal greeting, but Gruhorn can only reply with a dry observation that she hasn't changed. He thinks to himself that he, on the other hand, has changed so much that he's literally a different person on the inside. But the awkward reunion is cut short by the arrival of a familiar, intimidating figure, his uncle, Vale Balorhard. Vale's sharp eyes land on Arwen. She introduces herself as a probation knight of the prestigious Iron Lion Knights. Instead of remaining neutral, Vale offers her a chilling piece of advice. Be careful, because the prince's sword is vicious, much to Gruhorn's silent fury. Ignoring his nephew's glare, Vale orders them to take their positions. With his hand raised, he officially declares that the duel has begun. The moment the duel starts, Arwen explodes into action, taking a low, aggressive stance. Gruhorn watches with a confident smirk, curious to see the skills of the Iron Lion's prized prospect. Without warning, she launches herself into the air, her blade crackling with mana as she brings it down on him. But Gruhorn is unfazed, calmly assessing her attack. Decent movement, he notes. He meets her strike head-on, blocking the blow with perfect timing. But the force of the impact sends a shockwave through his unprepared body, causing his mana to backflow violently. Arwen doesn't let up for a second, pressing her advantage. Gruhorn is forced onto the back foot, clumsily parrying her relentless assault. She unleashes a furious barrage of strikes, a whirlwind of steel that gives him no room to breathe. Realizing he's being completely overwhelmed, Gruhorn grits his teeth. This won't do. She comes down on him like a bolt of lightning, sword crackling with pure power. But in that split second, Gruhorn taps into his true nature, activating the Dragon Slayer's heart. A crimson aura erupts around him, and he meets her strike head-on, stopping her cold. The sheer force of his block sends Arwen reeling back in shock. She's thrown completely off balance. Panting, she stares in disbelief. That sword? Gruhorn smirks, acknowledging her strength. She's on a completely different level from the others. But as he analyzes her, a new power awakens, the authority of judgment. Suddenly, he can see everything about her. Her stats, her skills, even her personality traits like sword prodigy and pure-hearted. And a chilling realization dawns on him. If this is what limited authority looks like, which means she's either weaker than me or at best my equal. With a roar, he declares the real fight has just begun, and the two clash in a blinding explosion of red and blue energy. The exchange leaves Gruhorn gasping for air. Arwen is in the same state, completely winded. They stand across from each other, both pushed to their limits after just one real exchange. But just as they prepare to re-engage, Vale steps in. Stop. That's it for today. We'll continue tomorrow. Gruhorn clicks his tongue in annoyance. I was just about to finish it. A confident smirk plays on Arwen's lips. What a coincidence. I was about to do the same. The tension between them crackles as Gruhorn challenges her to keep going, and Arwen coolly accepts. But Vale's voice booms across the courtyard, instantly silencing them both. Enough! Vale shuts them down with an iron will. It is already too late. Both of you, go get treated immediately. The royal physician rushes to Gruhorn's side, casting a healing spell. But Gruhorn can only scowl as the old man fusses over every little bruise. Across the courtyard, Arwen receives similar treatment, the tension still thick in the air. With the day's battle over, they turn their backs on each other, but Arwen's resolve is unbroken. I will absolutely not lose. And so the duels continue day after day, with no clear winner emerging. By the third day, the Royal Knights are buzzing with surprise. They knew Arwen was a prodigy, but the prince's skill has proven to be just as impressive. As they face each other once more, everyone hopes for a decisive end to this epic stalemate. But just as they're about to begin, Gruhorn raises a hand. Before we go another round, I have something to say. Arwen's eyes narrow in suspicion. Don't tell me you're trying to apologize now? Her voice drops, cold and absolute. I will not accept an apology. Gruhorn scoffs, dismissing her assumption with a wave. Admirable, but no, it's not that. A wicked grin spreads across his face. Since we're fighting this fiercely, shouldn't there be a prize? He lays out his proposal for all to hear. How about the loser grants one wish for the winner, no matter what it is? Arwen is stunned into silence. The Royal Knights, however, are absolutely horrified, pleading, Your Highness, you mustn't. Please withdraw your statement. Gruhorn ignores their panic, his eyes locked on his opponent. What do you think, Arwen? She straightens her posture, her loyalty overriding any temptation. As a knight loyal to the royal family, I could not dare commit such disrespect against your highness. However, she says with a sly grin, if it is within what your highness permits, I suppose I may be entitled to receive the prize of the bet. Gruhorn's own aura flares to life. Good thinking. With the terms accepted, Arwen charges, yelling, "No going back on your word later." Their blades meet in a shower of sparks. Arwen unleashes a sweeping slash of blue energy. But Gruhorn counters with a ferocious downward strike, his red aura exploding with power. Arwen is stunned by the force, thinking, "Fast! He wasn't this fast just yesterday." As a spectral dragon materializes behind him, she realizes the terrifying truth. Was he hiding his true strength? The duel reignites in a blur of motion, their bodies and blades clashing at impossible speeds. Arwen grits her teeth, barely holding back the onslaught of his newfound power. He presses his advantage, his blade a blur of red energy. With a final, focused strike, he shatters her defense in a cataclysmic explosion of power. A flurry of steel rings out, and in the blink of an eye, Arwen is brought to her knees, defeated. The watching knights are left completely speechless. Even Vale Balerhard watches with a grim, calculating expression. Arwen can only stare up in utter disbelief, whispering, This can't be." A shadow falls over her as Gruhorn declares his victory. "I won the bet." He stands over the fallen knight and addresses her directly. "Arwen Kiergain," he says with a wicked smirk. "I want you." Arwen's eyes widen in absolute shock. A new perspective begins, from a knight assigned to be the royal guard for the kingdom's notorious first prince. He notes that, contrary to his worries, the job wasn't difficult. In his first meeting, the prince asks, "You're the new royal guard?" The knight formally introduces himself. "Yes, I look forward to serving you, your highness." The knight observes that while the prince was arrogant, he didn't throw the violent tantrums the rumors suggested. Instead, the prince would simply run off into the courtyard. Because contrary to all the rumors, Prince Adrian trained with an almost inhuman ferocity day in and day out. Even in a torrential downpour, he wouldn't stop, leading the other guards to whisper, "Shouldn't we stop His Highness now?" But as a strange energy began to gather around the prince, the new guard could only scream in alarm, "Your Highness! Watch out!" A blinding flash of golden light erupts from the training dummy as the prince strikes, and through the shattering wood, Gruhorn grins with the fierce joy of a warrior pushing his limits. Watching the lone figure train relentlessly in the storm, the guard knew. He had a feeling His Highness was destined to become a great man. But the guard's perception was about to be shattered, as after winning the duel, Gruhorn declared his shocking wish to the defeated Arwen Kiergain. "I want you." The other knights are absolutely scandalized. Even his brutal uncle Vale begins to wonder if he's misjudged the prince. Arwen herself is in disbelief. She looks up, demanding, "Is that truly what your highness desires?" Gruhorn scoffs, reminding her that as she is now, she's just an apprentice who couldn't even beat a scoundrel prince. But with a wicked grin, he clarifies his true desire. It's not her he wants. It's the potential and future of the knight named Arwen Kiergain. He explains that he doesn't need a guard assigned by royal decree. He needs a knight who belongs only to him, a true follower. He can see her stats. A-rank swordsmanship, the sword prodigy trait. He acknowledges her immense talent. Therefore, Arwen Kiergain, become my knight. Arwen is stunned, her mind flashing back. She had achieved her dream of becoming a knight, but because of her striking appearance, the rumors and whispers followed her everywhere. No one treated her as a true knight, so she worked twice as hard as everyone else. She proved them all wrong on the training grounds, becoming the undisputed winner of her class. But even after defeating every single fellow apprentice, she still had to fight for respect. And despite showing such incredible results, the whispers followed her, reducing her to a poster girl, a pretty face to be protected. In their eyes, she could never be a true knight. So for someone to finally see her potential, her future as a warrior, she has to ask herself, is he sincere? Stealing her resolve, Arwen makes a single request. "Please treat me not as a woman, but as a knight." "If you do that," she declares, "I will do as your highness wishes." Their eyes meet, and with a simple smile, Gruhorn accepts her terms. "Fine, I promise." And just like that, the prodigy kneels, pledging her sword and her loyalty to the once disgraced prince. "I, Arwen, eldest daughter of the Kiergain family," she begins, swear loyalty to Prince Adrian Leonberg, and dedicate my sword and the rest of my life to your highness. Vale Balerhard watches on, his expression unreadable. Gruhorn raises his blade, accepting her oath. As a legitimate heir of Leonberg, in the name of Adrian Leonberg, I dub thee a knight. He touches the sword to her shoulder. Be brave, be courteous, and be loyal. The first true follower of the Sword Saint is born, and Arwen immediately throws herself into her training, her blade a silver blur in the courtyard. But the court is already buzzing with gossip, with knights calling Adrian a scoundrel and plotting to nullify the oath. The whispers turn venomous, speculating that the knighthood is just a cover for a sordid affair, a way for the prince to keep her as his mistress. And as the rumors spread like wildfire, Gruhorn is left pulling his hair out, screaming, "This is crazy! Am I some kind of villain?" He continues his meltdown, ranting that he's now seen as the worst scum on earth. His guard Carl watches on in silence, before finally speaking up. He asks about something the prince said a few days ago during the final duel. He's referring to when Gruhorn pointed out that a knight bound by royal decree isn't truly his own. Gruhorn bluntly asks if the truth upset him, pointing out that Carl would have to leave if the king ordered it. With a sly grin, he offers Carl the chance to swear a true oath of loyalty as well. Carl's expression turns serious as he asks, "If I said I would make the oath, would you accept it?" The answer is a swift and brutal no. He twists the knife, telling the stunned knight, "I don't want you. There's no joy in raising you, Carl." Carl tries to laugh off the brutal rejection, asking, "Is that so?" But Gruhorn's face is like stone as he confirms, "I'm not joking, I'm serious." Just then, a maid presents an official decree releasing Prince Adrian from probation to attend a royal banquet, leaving Gruhorn completely baffled. He can't believe it, wondering why they'd lift the punishment a month and a half early, especially after the king acted like he was going to lock him in the palace and never let him out again. As he walks away, still grumbling about his father's motives, the maid asks if he's happy about the news. He dismisses her, admitting that with no friends and nowhere to go, freedom doesn't mean much to him. His lonely confession startles the maid. She quickly apologizes, explaining that she just noticed another letter that arrived for him. An invitation? She presents him with an ornate invitation. Gruhorn reads it aloud, confused. A social club for special young lords? The maid explains that he was a member, which comes as a complete shock to Gruhorn. Sensing something is off, he asks if it's a weird place, and the maid's nervous reaction says it all. Her mind flashes back to the original Prince Adrian's true nature, a debaucherous slob whose tastes were incomprehensible. Disgusted, Gruhorn realizes it's just a club for drinking and womanizing, and immediately decides not to go. But as he's about to toss it aside, he notices a personal note on the back from an eternal friend named Bernardo of the Eli family. The name Eli stops him cold. He remembers them, the family that championed the monoheart theory before they were ruined a century ago. With this new information, he changes his mind instantly, deciding he'll attend the gathering after all. He hopes the Eli family hasn't completely fallen from grace just yet. 4 months after possessing the prince's body, a royal tailor fawns over the new, slimmer Adrian, ecstatic that he followed his instructions perfectly. The outfit is simple and black. The tailor gushes that despite the minimalist design, the prince's dignity remains as majestic as ever. Looking in the mirror, Gruhorn notes his significant weight loss, and the tailor confirms his measurements have decreased by more than half. The tailor is eager to start on the outfit for the palace banquet, but Gruhorn stops him. With a confident smirk, he declares that his measurements will change again by then. A few days later, he's in a royal carriage, on his way to the blasted social club for special young lords. A watchful knight escort rides alongside the carriage, but inside, Gruhorn is already over it, sighing that being a prince is an exhausting position. He complains that the clothes, the carriage, and the guards are all frustratingly stifling. His attention suddenly snaps to the maid sitting opposite him. He points to her neck and asks, "What is that scar?" She flinches, explaining it was a punishment for her own incompetence, something the prince was right to reprimand her for. Again? Gruhorn is horrified as he's hit with another wave of the original Adrian's terrible memories, wondering just how many horror stories are buried in this body's past. He looks at the terrified girl and realizes that despite seeing her for months, he doesn't even know her name. So, he asks her. She nervously introduces herself as Adelia Byron, and the name clearly startles him. Byron? He repeats. As she explains it's a minor noble family, Gruhorn is shocked to hear that name again in this era. His mind flashes back to a time long ago, before kingdoms even existed, when the various races of the continent roamed the land. He remembers a brutal, primordial age, an era where monstrous races preyed on humanity, and the weak were slaughtered without a second thought. But from the ashes of a great war, heroes rose to end that miserable history. 5 saviors who carved a new destiny for mankind, earning them the legendary title of the 5 Electors. And one of those 5 heroes was a woman who spoke to her partner in battle, the sword she called Gruhorn. Amidst the chaos of war, she asks him, "Have you ever thought about it? What you and I will be doing after this war ends?" But there was no time for idle dreams. For she was the one who beheaded Ida, the king of giants, and single-handedly ended the long era of exploitation. She was the iron-blooded sword marquis, and her name was Byron. Her full name was Agnes Byron. He remembers her weary sigh on the battlefield. Even surrounded by giants, her contempt was absolute. Her eyes blazed with golden fury. "Crawling back like dogs, thinking you'll have something to eat?" she roared, charging into the horde. "You pig-like, dog-like bastards! Creatures like you should have your heads smashed in!" And as her sword, he felt every ounce of that righteous rage. The memory is so foul that back in the present, Gruhorn clutches his head in disgust. "Just thinking about it dirties my ears." He tries to process the impossible truth. Anyway, a descendant of that Byron? Adelia is left stunned, wondering how the legendary Byron family could have fallen so far. Just then, the carriage halts and a voice announces their arrival. The night escort opens the door, finding the prince lost in thought. "Your Highness?" Gruhorn snaps back to reality, stepping out with a sharp look. "Great timing." He quickly dismisses his startled maid. "Adelia, we'll talk later." A smarmy voice cuts through the air, calling out to him. A man with long white hair greets him with a dramatic flourish. Bernardo of the Eli family greets Prince Adrian Leonberg. As Bernardo lays on the charm, Gruhorn is thoroughly unimpressed, thinking, this punk is a descendant of the Eli family? Bernardo notes his weight loss with feigned concern, but Gruhorn's eyes narrow suspiciously. He lets out a short, contemptuous laugh, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Bernardo's feigned concern is met with a chillingly calm response. "No, it's nothing. I just thought it was good that I came." Gruhorn pats him on the shoulder, his smile turning predatory. "Thanks to you," he says. "Today will be very entertaining." Bernardo is visibly taken aback by the gesture. The club is a den of debauchery, with members loudly sharing lewd stories and engaging in shameless flirtations. But amidst the chaos, Gruhorn sits apart, calmly observing the scene. Bernardo watches him from the side, a bead of sweat on his brow. He thinks, this is strange. Normally this scoundrel would be dead drunk by now. As Gruhorn calmly sips his wine, Bernardo realizes his aura feels different compared to before. The prince is a picture of stoic composure, a complete departure from his old self. Suddenly, another club member with a sleazy grin leans in, eager to share some gossip. "You plucked the flower of the Iron Lion," he smirks, referring to Arwen. "The rumors are everywhere." Gruhorn listens, unfazed. The man throws his hands up in frustration, whining, "I was a step too late. If I knew this would happen, I should have gotten her oath first." His expression turns lecherous as he fantasizes. "She was beautiful enough in armor, but I wonder how incredible her flesh underneath must be." Gruhorn cuts him off with a cold, simple question. "Hey, do you have any siblings at home?" Before the man can answer, Bernardo chimes in. "Have you forgotten? I have a younger brother." Gruhorn replies with an ominous calm. "That's a relief." Before the sleazy man can even ask what he means, Gruhorn's fist flies forward with blinding speed. The brutal impact sends the man's head snapping back. He crashes to the floor, surrounded by shattered glass and spilled wine. The entire room freezes, the partygoers staring in absolute shock. Even Bernardo is completely stunned by the sudden violence. With a chilling smirk, Gruhorn clarifies his earlier comment. "It's a relief that your family line won't end." And before anyone can process the threat, he stomps his foot down hard on the unconscious man's chest. The room erupts in gasps as Gruhorn stands over his victim, a king asserting his dominance. Looking down at the broken man, he declares, "From now on, your younger brother is the heir." Enraged, one of the man's friends lunges forward to attack, but Gruhorn meets him with another vicious right hook to the jaw. The other guests can only watch in abject terror. Bernardo breaks into a cold sweat, realizing the drunken fool he once knew has been replaced by a stone-cold predator. The enraged club member sputters in disbelief, grabbing Gruhorn's arm and demanding to know why he's doing this. Gruhorn's grip tightens as he leans in, his voice a low growl. "Listen well." His eyes burn with cold fury as he lays down his new law. "I can tolerate you thinking of me as a scoundrel, but I cannot tolerate you treating me like one."
The other guests are completely baffled by his cryptic warning.
Gruhorn clarifies his point with another brutal punch, roaring, "It means you need to get hit some more." The man is sent flying across the room. As silence falls, Gruhorn stands over his handiwork, an aura of pure menace radiating from him. His victim lies broken and unconscious on the floor. Terrified, Bernardo drops to his knees as Gruhorn calls out to him, and he can only stammer in reply. A wicked, bloodthirsty grin spreads across Gruhorn's face as he reminds the terrified host, "Didn't I tell you? Today seemed like it would be very entertaining." Bernardo can't comprehend what's happening, wondering why this crazy bastard has suddenly snapped. Gruhorn towers over him and issues a chilling command, "Summon the Royal Knights." Without a moment's hesitation, Bernardo scrambles to his feet, vowing to obey. He flees the room, leaving Gruhorn standing as the undisputed center of a silent, terrified audience. Blood splatters his face, but his expression is utterly calm. He then turns his attention to the other guests, ordering the women to leave. One of the men makes a move to leave as well, but Gruhorn's voice cuts through the silence, sharp as glass. "I believe I said women." A cruel smile plays on his lips as he delivers a terrifying ultimatum, implying he'll castrate any man who dares to flee. The memory of his brutality hangs heavy in the air. The threat lands with sickening force, and the remaining men are paralyzed by sheer terror. He calmly lists their transgressions, starting with their complete lack of respect for his royal status. They mocked him to his face, and worst of all, they insulted his knight, Arwen. As the royal knights finally arrive, Gruhorn turns to them with a chillingly calm question. The lead knight immediately begins to list the charges, starting with insulting royalty. The men's faces drain of all color. But the knight isn't finished, escalating the crime to nothing less than treason. Fully prepared to act, they await their prince's command. His order is simple, cold, and absolute. Everyone. Later, Gruhorn stands before the throne, facing the consequences of his brutal display of power. The king is livid, roaring that Gruhorn arrested 14 noble children, tacking on every grand excuse from insulting royalty to treason. But Gruhorn remains completely unfazed. The king explains the political nightmare he's created. Since he invoked royal authority, the punishment must be severe, but the backlash from 14 families could be catastrophic. With a smirk, Gruhorn asks, "Are you worried about the backlash?" He dismisses the men as irredeemable trash and outcasts that their own families would be glad to be rid of. His solution is simple: send a letter. He tells the king to stop playing dumb and send it to the people best equipped to handle the internal politics of each family. The true recipients? The ambitious brothers and sisters of those arrested scoundrels. The king is left speechless by the cold, ruthless logic. With a curt dismissal, the king sends him away, and Gruhorn leaves, gloating that he's won the argument. Back in his room, Gruhorn tries to reassure his terrified maid, Adelia, telling her not to be nervous. But his kind words only make her tremble more, as she tearfully asks what she's done wrong. Gruhorn realizes with a grimace that the original Prince Adrian must have tormented her relentlessly. He recalls that her family, the Bayerns, are now just minor nobles who barely cling to their status. But in his ancient memory, that name was legendary. The history of the Bayerns' glory was erased, their descendants cut off from their own heroic past. Their great prestige and lofty pride have all vanished. And yet, as a status window appears, it reveals the dormant power within her. S-rank swordsmanship and A-rank mana sensitivity. Gruhorn is completely floored. What truly shocks him, however, are her contradictory traits. She's a butcher who goes berserk at the sight of blood and a war maniac obsessed with battle, yet simultaneously has a fragile heart, a caregiver nature, and a passive slave mentality. He realizes she has unrivaled talent, but absolutely nothing to control her inner madness. He clutches his head, wondering if he has the right to unleash such a monster upon the world. But after a moment of hesitation, he makes his decision. He has to try. After all, an S-rank talent is too valuable to ignore. And luckily for him, there's one trait he can exploit. Slave mentality, a passive skill that makes her find joy in serving a master with all her heart. With a plan in mind, he looks down at the terrified maid and gives a simple command. Adelia Byron, swear your loyalty to me. She's completely bewildered by the sudden demand. He clarifies, telling her to become his knight and swear her oath right here, right now. The command completely overwhelms her and she collapses to the floor, pleading that she is not worthy of such an honor. Gruhorn cuts through her excuses, reminding her, "You said your family was insignificant." He then makes an offer she can't refuse. He will take responsibility for her family, but in return she must swear absolute loyalty and serve him as her master. He acknowledges her inner chaos, promising that if she can't control her own madness, he will hold the reins for her. With a glimmer of hope, she asks if he truly means it. His answer is a simple, unwavering yes. The promise to bring her family to the capital is the final push she needs, and her resolve solidifies. I will do as you say. With her head bowed, she begins her formal oath, declaring herself Adelia, eldest daughter of the Byron family, swearing loyalty to Prince Adrian Leonberg. As he listens with a cold, calculating gaze, she vows to devote her entire life to serving him as her master. Good. Placing a hand on her head, he gives his first command. From now on, you will obey my orders unconditionally. She accepts without hesitation. And just like that, her fear is replaced by a look of pure, unsettling devotion. The slave mentality has been successfully activated. But as he reflects on his choice, a rare moment of doubt flickers across his face. His actions have not gone unnoticed, and the court is already buzzing with venomous gossip, starting with how he used underhanded methods to force Arwen's oath. They whisper about how he brutally assaulted the sons of nobles before having them all thrown in prison. And now, the latest scandal. He's making a simple maid his personal knight, a move everyone assumes is just a cover to build a harem. Gruhorn can't believe it, wondering when he suddenly became the center of everyone's attention. He laments that after taking just one night, the entire palace has an opinion. But his complaints are cut short by the furious arrival of the king, who roars that he's busy cleaning up Adrian's political mess. His uncle Vale is next, calling him pathetic and questioning if he's already given up on their bet. And to complete the trifecta of judgment, his rival, the third Prince Gillian, appears with a smug grin, mocking his choice to knight a maid. Overwhelmed by the onslaught, Gruhorn can only wonder how the rumors spread so damn fast. But the onslaught is interrupted by a new arrival, the Queen, sending Gruhorn into a full-blown tantrum. His mother enters with a heavy sigh, disappointed that he seems to be reverting to his old, scandalous ways. But her disappointment quickly shifts to a calculating smile, as she declares this situation actually works out well. Her solution? An arranged marriage to force him to settle down, an idea that leaves Gruhorn utterly baffled. She roars with maternal authority, vowing to find him a suitable spouse herself. Completely steamrolled, Gruhorn can only slump in his chair, utterly defeated by this new unexpected development. Later, he meets with his new knight Adelia, who nervously asks if she will now be able to use mana. Gruhorn confirms she will, promising her access to a very special kind of mana. He channels his own power, a swirling blue energy gathering in his hand. He declares that while the world may have forgotten the legendary sword Marquis, he remembers everything, as a brilliant golden light begins to envelop Adelia. He will grant her the power of her ancestor Agnes Byron, the footsteps she left behind. The sword that danced at her fingertips, and the very soul of the warrior herself. He imprints the magnificent beating of her heart directly onto Adelia. The ritual is a success. For the first time in her life, Adelia Byron can sense mana. Gruhorn receives confirmation. He has successfully imprinted the mana, allowing it to settle within her body. A mana heart has been created. Adelia stares at her hands, feeling the unfamiliar energy coursing through her. Gruhorn explains that he has just shown her the method for forging a mana heart, ordering her to practice it whenever she can. But just as he finishes speaking, he suddenly collapses, and Adelia cries out in alarm. Gruhorn grits his teeth, cursing the weakness of Adrian's body. To think creating a single mana heart would drain him this completely. He brushes off her concern, claiming he's just tired, but Adelia is overwhelmed, asking why he would go to such lengths for someone as lowly as her. Gruhorn coldly tells her it's fine and orders her to leave now. But when he turns, he finds her still staring at him with an unreadable expression. Suddenly, she drops into a deep bow, her face contorted with fierce devotion as she vows to serve him with loyalty for the rest of her life. A smug grin spreads across Gruhorn's face. Just don't forget that I am your master. She eagerly agrees, her loyalty now absolute. But as he turns away, his thoughts reveal a darker, more manipulative side. He's afraid she might forget. Truly afraid of what her awakened S-rank potential might unleash if her loyalty ever wavers. A few days later, Arwen Kirgayen, now in full armor, reports to her new master. She informs him that Bernardo Ely is being held by the Royal Guard as a witness to the social club incident, and no one is allowed to see him until the trial begins, a development that catches Gruhorn completely off guard. Gruhorn groans, asking if he has to attend the trial, but Arwen clarifies that royalty is above such proceedings. That's a relief. Later, he complains about the situation being blown out of proportion, while Adelia quietly works nearby. He suddenly addresses her, and the startled maid asks what he means. He asks if her mana heart has stabilized, and she confirms that it has. Pleased, Gruhorn leans forward and declares that from now on, she will be joining him in his training. He gives her a confident thumbs up, ordering her to change and meet him at the training grounds. As she stands there flustered, he reminds her to drop the rag. She's a knight now, not just a maid. Soon after, Gruhorn is on the training grounds, warming up for their session. But he stops, turning with a glare to ask, "What do you think you're doing?" Vale Balorhard snaps that he's warming up, but Gruhorn clarifies, "Not you." He was talking about Adelia, who is pushing herself to the limit, running laps around the training grounds. Gruhorn casually tells his uncle that he's making her a knight, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. Vale is absolutely livid, roaring at him for treating the title of knight so trivially. He scolds the prince for his recklessness, but Gruhorn has had enough, snapping back and calling his uncle a busybody. "If you hate it so much, why do you keep coming here?" he yells as Vale stammers in shock. Just then, Adelia collapses, panting that she's completed her 10 laps. The two men watch her in silence. She immediately begins to apologize for causing a scene, but Gruhorn cuts her off, holding out a wooden sword. "Forget it. Take this." With a confident smirk, he declares, "Today, I'll teach you just the basic stance. First, take your stance," he instructs, demonstrating a flawless, powerful swing that slices through the air. "And swing like this." Adelia stares, wide-eyed, as he tells her to give it a try. Trembling with exhaustion, she awkwardly tries to mimic his posture. Like this? But then, she unleashes a perfect, explosive swing of her own, the force of it cracking the very ground beneath her feet. Vale watches from the sidelines, completely stunned. Gruhorn is just as shocked. She copied it that well after seeing it just once? Oblivious to the shock she's caused, Adelia asks if her stance was correct, but Gruhorn is lost in thought. Wait a minute. His shock quickly morphs into a cold sweat of panic. If I let my guard down, he realizes, she'll surpass me in no time. His mind flashes back to the original prince's cruelty, recalling that her loyalty is tied to strength, not weakness. A terrifying vision fills his head. Adelia, powerful and cold, holding a blade to his throat. If she surpasses me now, he thinks, his paranoia running wild. Vale smirks, his mind racing. To think she possesses such talent? But Gruhorn violently grabs his arm, stopping him cold. "What do you think you're doing?" His eyes burn with possessive fury. "Don't you dare covet her!" Vale just sneers back, completely unimpressed. What could you possibly offer that child? He dismisses the prince entirely. You're just a novice who's only held a sword for a few months. As his own powerful aura flares to life, Vale declares, "You cannot handle her." Gruhorn knows the original prince would have trembled and backed down instantly. But I am not him, he thinks, his resolve hardening. If I cannot handle her... A terrifying skull-shaped aura explodes from his fist. Then no one can, he snarls, his own immense power surging to meet the challenge. He remembers his past life as a legendary blade, a weapon that has drunk the blood of the giant king. Slain the mad dragon, and countless other beings, he is Gruhorn, A system window confirms it. A portion of his very soul is manifesting in response to his will. This isn't just a prince's tantrum. For the first time, the fearsome quad-chain knight looks genuinely unnerved. Gruhorn's voice is low and guttural. She is... mine. He warns his uncle with absolute finality. Do not look at her and do not covet her. His eyes burn with a terrifying possessiveness as he snarls. I truly hate it when someone takes what is mine. Vale stands in stunned silence, the threat hanging heavy in the air. But the strain of unleashing his true soul sends Gruhorn spiraling into a terrifying vision, his consciousness sinking into a cold, dark abyss. He feels his humanity slipping away, wondering if this is an omen of what's to come. He realizes with dawning horror that at this rate, Adrian's weak human body will be completely consumed by the overwhelming soul of the legendary sword Gruhorn. He's being devoured, but with a surge of will he roars, "That's enough!" He forces his own monstrous soul back into submission and snaps back to reality, landing firmly on the training grounds. Ignoring the terrifying internal battle, he calmly continues his lecture to Vale, stating, "A single ordinary knight can save the lives of 10 soldiers. A single outstanding knight," Vale roars, "can save the lives of 100 soldiers. And that child," he declares, pointing to Adelia, "might be able to save 1,000 or even more." But Gruhorn is completely unmoved, coolly analyzing his uncle's conviction. He knows this isn't just about talent. For the commander of the northern frontier, this is about some grand, noble cause. However, Gruhorn's response is ice cold. "I don't care." Vale is stunned by his callousness, but before he can argue, Adelia steps forward. With unwavering devotion, she rejects Vale's offer, declaring, "My body and heart already belong to His Highness. I cannot follow your words." The fearsome knight is left utterly speechless. Gruhorn smirks, reveling in his victory. He internally gloats that the slave mentality he forged is working perfectly, before telling his uncle, "That is what she says." Then he twists the knife, dismissing Vale entirely. "Besides, wasn't your only goal to help me lose weight? You have nothing left to teach me." He issues a final, chilling warning. "If you wish to keep visiting my palace, do not interfere with my affairs from now on." Defeated, Vale grits his teeth and concedes, "Understood." But even after that day, Vale continues to visit the palace, watching Adelia's training from afar, unable to interfere but obsessed with her potential. Gruhorn watches him, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, thinking, "It is quite entertaining to watch my arrogant uncle squirm like that." Suddenly, Adelia's sword begins to glow with a brilliant golden aura, and she looks up in surprise. Vale's eyes widen in utter shock. That is... Even Gruhorn is stunned, his mind racing. Did she learn sword resonance already? He claps enthusiastically, but his praise hides a growing dread. To be this fast, I might actually get overtaken? Adelia simply beams, happy to have earned her master's approval. Vale storms over to Gruhorn, his expression grim. Did you teach her the mana heart as well?" Gruhorn casually confirms it. "Yeah, is something wrong?" Vale's fury erupts. "Was it not enough for you alone to learn such a cheap trick?" The prince's eyes turn to ice. He turns his back on the furious knight and issues a single, chilling command. "Get out!" But Vale isn't finished, roaring that Gruhorn has ruined Adelia's unimaginable potential with his reckless methods. Unmoved, Gruhorn orders his knight to remove him. "Carl, escort him out!" Vale scoffs, deciding to leave on his own accord. The quad-chain knight storms off, leaving a worried Adelia to ask, "Your Highness, is what I learned a cheap trick?" Gruhorn's expression softens instantly as he reassures her. "No, absolutely not." Adelia asks, "Then why does the Count speak like that?" Gruhorn coldly replies, "Because he doesn't know." He scoffs internally, thinking that the people of this era have completely forgotten what a real mana heart is like. If they hadn't forgotten, he mutters, they wouldn't have discarded it like a pair of old shoes. Turning back to Adelia, he promises, "You will find out soon enough the true power of the mana heart." Sometime later, Gruhorn waits on the training grounds when a familiar figure returns. It's Vale, and he's not finished yet. "You acted like you would never come back? Prove it." The quad-chain knight lays down a challenge. "I will use only a single ring. If you can push me back even half a step, I will acknowledge you." Gruhorn grips his sword, a smirk playing on his lips as he recalls their original deal. What was the bet back then? He gives the blade a test swing. Granting a wish? Vale's eyes glow with intensity. If you win, I will grant you one thing, whatever it may be. If you ask me to pass down the family's secret technique, I will do so. Gruhorn's eyes gleam with ambition. That's not what I want, he thinks, but accepts the terms for now. With a roar, he lunges forward, swinging his blade directly at his uncle's neck. Vale doesn't even flinch, a smirk playing on his lips. Aiming for the neck right from the start, he calmly observes his nephew's ferocity. Still as venomous of a sword as ever, Gruhorn pivots, launching another powerful strike. His eyes glow with raw power, but Vale meets the attack with a single effortless block. The wooden swords clash as Gruhorn puts all his weight into the blow. Vale looks down on him, completely unbothered. Is this all? He taunts. The prince's confidence shatters as he realizes the immense gap in their strength. The sheer force of the block sends Gruhorn skidding back, carving a trench in the dirt. Vale looks down on him. Have you given up already? But Gruhorn rises with a defiant grin. As if. He admits to himself that his uncle is detestable, but undeniably strong. He knows Vale is just waiting for him to exhaust his mana for an even more humiliating defeat. And with his current mana heart, that's exactly what would happen. So instead of attacking, he changes tactics with a smirk. Is it not strange? Vale is confused as Gruhorn begins a history lesson. 400 years ago, countless mana heart knights achieved unbelievable feats. Yet, he scoffs, just because one somewhat useful technique appeared, all the arts of those great knights are now treated as trash. He continues, explaining that everyone thinks the mana chain technique is a much more powerful method of mana manipulation than the mana heart. Vale cuts him off, demanding to know his point. My thoughts are different, Gruhorn replies. It was not the mana heart that was weak, but its masters, he declares. Just because it's a mana heart doesn't mean they are all the same. With a confident smirk, he poses a cryptic question. Uncle, have you perhaps heard of the martial spirit hymn? But Vale has had enough of the lecture. This is a place to cross swords, not to discuss such ear-tickling things. Gruhorn just grins, completely unfazed. I thought you would say that, Uncle. He reminds Vale of his own dismissive words, but the quad-chain knight is done talking. You talk too much. Vale mocks him, asking if he needs more time to catch his breath. With glowing eyes, Gruhorn simply states, no. He steps forward, his aura flaring around him. The path a knight has walked becomes an achievement. Holding his sword before him, he unleashes his power. 100 victories are my pride and my power. Vale is completely lost as Gruhorn begins to chant, singing of the 100 victories he won against 20 trainees. He explains that every achievement is engraved upon the heart, and that engraved achievement becomes a martial spirit hymn. A new power awakens, dwelling within his blade, the hymn of sparring. With a terrifying grin, he dismisses it as a small achievement from the past year and a half, activating its power. This, he declares, is the true power of the mana heart, the martial spirit hymn. But as the hymn's effect activates, Vale remains completely unimpressed, scoffing that it's all the same. He lectures that as long as Gruhorn possesses a mana heart, he can never defeat the superior mana chain. Gruhorn ignores the taunt and lunges forward, clashing blades with his uncle once more. Vale explains that the mana chain's power is designed to cause a crippling backflow through a mana heart. He smirks, completely confident in his superiority. He taunts Gruhorn, saying he's good at stubbornly enduring, but that's all. However, Gruhorn just smirks back. He reveals the brutal truth behind this power. To obtain this hymn, he sparred over 100 times and withstood the punishing mana of the rings over 1,000 times, forging a power specifically to deal with knights like Vale. For every 100 clashes, he endured 1,000 waves of pain. This, he declares, is the power of the hymn of sparring. His blade pulses with newfound power. And for the first time, Vale looks impressed, admitting that now this fight seems worth a try. With his hymn active, Gruhorn clashes with Vale, their blades locked in a stalemate. He unleashes a furious barrage of strikes, pushing the quad-chain knight back. A confident, almost manic grin spreads across his face. Vale is genuinely surprised, thinking to himself that the boy has lasted far longer than he should have. But as Gruhorn asks how this is possible, Vale reminds him that not all mana is the same. calling him arrogant before striking him down. With a single powerful blow glowing with teal energy, Vale shatters his nephew's guard completely. He declares that playtime is over, admitting that just enduring this long was commendable enough. As Gruhorn collapses, he realizes his normal grade hymn is simply not enough to win. Looming over the defeated prince, Vale begins a history lesson, taking us back 400 years. He explains that 400 years ago, the knights made a grave mistake. In their quest for peace, they annihilated every enemy, leaving nothing for their descendants to fight. At first, their legendary sword techniques, the true method of refining the mana heart, and the shining martial spirit hymn were passed down. But time gnawed away at their achievements, until eventually they were forgotten. The tales of dragons and giant kings they once fought were dismissed as absurd legends. In their place, new, weaker hymns were created, hymns built for humans to fight other humans, achieving victories against mere soldiers and knights. These lesser powers failed to reach the grade of myth or hero and couldn't withstand the winds of change. Vale concludes that with paltry techniques like the mana chain, one can never reach true transcendence. But Gruhorn, ever defiant, just scoffs from the ground, asking if his uncle has been day drinking because he can't understand a word of his rambling. But Gruhorn's spirit is far from broken. He internally scoffs at Vale, calling him an arrogant and foolish knight. As a crimson aura begins to bleed from his body, he declares that they all need to understand just how much power they have truly lost. A monstrous draconic aura erupts around him as he rises to his feet, promising that if they don't know, he will teach them. He will teach them the power that can split a dragon's scales and drink its hot blood. With a roar, he unleashes his true power, singing the legendary hymn of true dragon slaying. But the power is too immense. Adrian's mortal body can't handle the strain, and he begins to hemorrhage under the pressure. The system forcibly nerfs the ability, omitting verse after verse until only a tiny fraction of its true power remains, unleashing the attack, splitting the dragon's scales. With eyes glowing a murderous red, Gruhorn prepares to strike back. He lunges forward, bringing his blade down with terrifying force. Vale barely blocks the strike, his own sword cracking under the immense pressure. He realizes with dawning horror that this new power is overwhelming him. He's about to be devoured. The clash erupts in a massive explosion, but the recoil is too much, and Gruhorn is sent flying backwards as his retainers scream in panic. When the dust settles, Vale stands completely unmoved. Gruhorn lies on the ground, battered and bleeding. But his spirit is unbroken. He looks up and taunts his uncle. "Didn't you say you'd only use one ring?" He points out that Vale had to use all 4 of his mana chains. And even then, he couldn't stop his own sword from being shattered. He acknowledges that the mana heart is still inferior to the mana ring, a truth he was willing to challenge. With a defiant glare, he addresses his uncle by his full title. "Count Vale Balorhardy, you lost." A flash of memory hits him, the moment his true, monstrous power began to tear Adrian's body apart. His own soul had screamed at him to stop, to pull back before the vessel was destroyed. The memory jolts him. A searing pain erupts from his chest. And later that day, he collapses onto his bed, the backlash hitting him with full force. He curses the legendary power, the hymn of true dragon slaying. This agony is the price for forcefully drawing out even a fraction of its power, the nerfed version known as splitting the dragon's scales. He reflects that the hymn is a martial spirit born from myth itself. "My body became a wreck," he smirks, "but it was well worth the risk. Because from that legendary power, he has woven the very first martial spirit hymn of his own. A hymn born from 100 victories and 1,000 waves endured in countless duels. A new power to stand against even greater challenges. The system confirms it. The grade of his new hymn of sparring has risen. This should be enough for that third prince bastard, he thinks, just as Adelia's worried voice cuts through. She's overjoyed, exclaiming that he's finally regained consciousness. Adelia explains that total chaos erupted after he collapsed, and she's never seen the queen so furious with Vale. Gruhorn just scoffs, thinking they both deserved it, as Adelia mentions that his uncle left a message. Vale wants to be notified the moment he wakes up. Gruhorn's expression hardens. "Don't report that yet," Gruhorn says, leaning back. "I'm going to rest for a while." He knows that if he doesn't properly recover his spirit from the backlash of the hymn, he'll pay a terrible price. His mind would shatter, trapping him in an endless loop of his own memories until he became a complete madman. The thought of being trapped in the sword's memories after finally becoming human again makes him shudder. He recalls his original wielder, the legendary swordswoman Agnes Byrne. Later, over a meal, he tells Adelia that since she's a descendant of that same Byrne, she should be able to inherit the martial spirit hymn she left behind. Adelia is stunned to learn about her legendary ancestor. Of course, Gruhorn continues, you'll need to grow much stronger to possess a hymn befitting that grade. He then gets serious, asking her a direct question. What do you want to do by learning the sword? The sudden question leaves Adelia completely flustered. Adelia mulls over the question, her mind racing with the possibility. If I could truly become a knight, she's completely overwhelmed, unable to form a coherent thought. Seeing her struggle, Gruhorn gets up. If you can't think of it, tell me later. But just as he turns to leave, Adelia finds her voice and calls out to him. With a sudden fierce resolve, she declares, I will become your highness's sword. The narrator explains that some martial hymns begin with the sound of a charging trumpet, signaling the start of a great battle, while others, like this one, begin with a simple, heartfelt oath. A brilliant golden aura erupts from Adelia as she swears her vow, I will live for you and dedicate my everything to you. The energy flows from her and into Gruhorn, who realizes with a shock, this is the birth of Adelia's martial spirit hymn. But this hymn isn't just for her, the golden energy flows directly into Gruhorn. A system notification confirms it, a new martial spirit hymn has been created. And it's not just Adelia's a normal grade, hymn of domination has been created for Gruhorn himself. This is a hymn of subordination, an oath of submission that binds two souls together. Adelia snaps out of her trance, but Gruhorn is stunned, thinking a descendant of the fierce sword marquis would never create a hymn of pure subordination. He realizes he's just received some very unexpected help. As the target of her hymn, her growth will now directly benefit him as well. This creates a perfect symbiotic relationship. Gruhorn stands and offers a sincere thank you, leaving Adelia completely flustered by the sudden gratitude. He admits he's not sure exactly how this new power will manifest. A few days pass, and Gruhorn finds himself in an incredibly awkward situation. His new knights, Carl and Arwen, stand by nervously, as the queen fusses over him, calling him by his nickname Ian. Gruhorn grits his teeth, thinking it's much easier to deal with enemies than it is to handle someone who genuinely cared for the original pathetic Prince Adrian.
She then asks if he resents his uncle Vale for the brutal duel.
She tries to downplay the incident, but Gruhorn cuts her off, stating coldly that he has no bad feelings. But his stoic response only makes her more emotional, as she breaks down, convinced he must be lying to hide his pain. He repeats himself, completely unmoved. No, I really don't. Internally, Gruhorn recalls their duel, thinking that he landed a blow that shattered more than just Vale's sword. It shattered his pride. He knows he planted a seed of doubt, an inner demon that will fester within the proud knight. With a cold smirk, he concludes that Vale will either overcome this challenge and grow stronger, or break completely, and frankly, Gruhorn couldn't care less. The queen, however, tries to defend her brother, explaining that Vale is just clumsy with people but was secretly proud of his nephew's progress. She then reveals that Vale even went to persuade the king on Adrian's behalf. Gruhorn is stunned as his mother reveals it was Vale who got his probation lifted ahead of schedule. She explains that Adrian's immediate rampage at the social club put Vale in an impossible political position, forcing him to act so harshly. The revelation completely short-circuits Gruhorn's brain. He can't fathom why the man who despises him would ever stick his neck out for him. Before he can process this, an old scholar named Niccolo Marchiadel enters, addressing the prince. Niccolo has apparently come to tutor the prince, but Gruhorn immediately refuses. He throws a full-blown tantrum, screaming about how he doesn't need to study, while Niccolo calmly asks what separates a man from a beast if not learning. Gruhorn furiously accuses the scholar of calling him a beast, but Niccolo just roasts him, saying he can't call him a beast. Yet. Still defiant, Gruhorn insists he already knows everything and doesn't need to learn anything more. With a knowing smile, Niccolo decides to call his bluff. He proposes a test. If Gruhorn can prove his knowledge on a few topics, Niccolo will leave him alone for good. Thinking this is an easy win, Gruhorn smirks and accepts the challenge. The discussion begins, and Gruhorn slams the table, passionately making his point. He argues that a ruler must be ruthless, because leniency invites betrayal, and to his surprise, Niccolo completely agrees. The old scholar then slides a book titled Theory of the Iron-Blooded Monarch across the table, revealing he's just tricked the legendary sword into his first political science lesson. Caught in the trap, Gruhorn actually starts reading, explaining the transactional nature of power between a ruler and their subjects. The two fall into a surprisingly deep discussion, with Niccolo admitting that the prince is making some excellent points. Hours fly by, until Niccolo finally closes his books for the day. Beaming, he declares the lesson over, and a slightly dazed Gruhorn agrees to continue their discussion tomorrow. And that's when it hits him. He just willingly sat through an entire lesson. A wry smile crosses his face as he admits to himself, that old man is incredibly sly. As Niccolo leaves, he reflects on their session. He walks through the palace halls, realizing the first prince is nothing like the rumors suggested. Later that night, Gruhorn lies in bed, contemplating the day's unexpected turn of events. The legendary sword, now a prince, flops onto his bed, utterly defeated by his greatest foe yet, boredom. With his body still recovering, he has nothing to do but wonder if he's been living too diligently lately. His moping is cut short when a maid bursts in with an announcement, Sir Vale Balorhard is here to see him. A guest. A wicked grin spreads across Gruhorn's face as he eagerly tells her to let him in. He stands ready, thinking to himself that it was about time his uncle came to see him. As Vale enters, radiating his usual intimidating aura, Gruhorn smirks, believing the quad-chain knight is still reeling from their last encounter. But then the unthinkable happens. Vale looks him dead in the eye and says, "I am sorry." He continues, formally apologizing for breaking his promise and causing him injury, offering no excuses for his actions. Gruhorn is floored. A pang of conscience hits him as he remembers the truth. His injuries weren't from Vale's blade, but from the backlash of his own terrifying power. His mother's words echo in his mind, reminding him of the difficult political position he put his uncle in, and the guilt strikes him like lightning. To make amends, Vale offers him anything he wants. He even offers his own armor eye, but a flustered Gruhorn snaps back, asking what he'd do with junk like that. Internally, he scoffs at the mighty swordmaster getting so caught up in his own guilt. Trying to regain control of the situation, he puffs out his chest and declares he'll be generous. He'll state his wish. He asks for just one thing, to be allowed to go on an outing. Vale is confused, reminding him that his probation is over and he's free to leave whenever he wants. But Gruhorn clarifies with a sly grin, he wants a real trip far away from the capital. Vale agrees, though it will take time to arrange around the upcoming banquet, a condition Gruhorn casually accepts. With the deal struck, Vale promises to contact him once the schedule is set and the tense meeting finally concludes. As Vale stares, Gruhorn snaps at him, demanding to know what he's looking at. Vale admits with an awkward smile that the request was just unexpected. He was prepared for something far more unreasonable. He explains that since he broke his promise, it was the perfect opportunity for Gruhorn to take advantage of him. But Gruhorn confesses that seeing the stubborn old man actually feel bad for him was a strange feeling. The tense moment is shattered by Karl's hearty laughter, earning him a sharp rebuke from Gruhorn for getting too comfortable. A cold stare. Just then, Adelia approaches with a letter, announcing its long-awaited arrival. Gruhorn takes the envelope marked with a distinct red wax seal. The letter is from Arwen Kurgayan, who writes that she has recently achieved an accomplishment, her form crackling with immense energy. With a look of fierce determination, she promises she'll be able to visit him soon and signs off. Gruhorn smirks, pleased with the news. A week later, the day of their departure finally arrives, and a grand procession leaves the capital. Inside his carriage, a restless Gruhorn eagerly asks Vale for their destination. His uncle, however, looks less than thrilled with his nephew's boundless energy. "Get back inside," Vale sighs. "I'll explain." Their first stop is the renowned Ellen County. Vale explains that it's the kingdom's greatest production site for weaponry, home to vast iron mines, and a guild of artisan smiths who refine the high-quality ore. In fact, more than half of all weapons supplied to the royal family come from Ellen, which is music to Gruhorn's ears. With a cunning smile, he thinks to himself that it's finally time to find a sword worthy of his skill. Originally, he planned to just grab a sword from the royal armory, but he remembers the king's furious decree. After his rampage, Prince Adrian is forbidden from being issued any weapons. Considering the original prince's track record, he can't really blame them. But this just means if he wants a proper weapon, he'll have to find one himself. He glances over at his uncle, musing that for a brute, Vale can be surprisingly thoughtful. As their royal procession travels through the countryside, Gruhorn complains about his uncle blocking the view. And so, their 70-day journey begins. The journey's itinerary is laid out on a map, showing a 3-day trip from the Leonberg Kingdom to Ellen County. After their stop, they will travel for another 2 days to Iron Lion Castle to rest before finally returning to the capital. Inside the royal carriage, Gruhorn reflects on his current predicament, stuck sitting still for 3 whole days. He finds his travel companion, his Uncle Vale, to be completely uninteresting, offering only the most basic of answers. Deciding to make use of the idle time, Gruhorn resolves to check on the state of his mana heart. He recalls that as a side effect of using the Hymn of True Dragon Slaying, his heart was left completely empty. Believing enough time has passed, he prepares to refill it, causing blue energy to swirl around his core. To do so, he focuses on the sensations around him, starting with the rattling vibration of the carriage. He then attunes himself to the slightly cold breeze passing by the window. Finally, he listens to the faint voices of the knights riding outside. He gathers the specks of mana hidden in the world around him. As he begins the process, he considers what will happen once he fills the empty mana heart. But as he observes his core, he is shocked to see how large his mana heart has become. A system notification explains that by attempting a feat beyond his capacity, he glimpsed a fragment of a colossal will, a side effect of forcibly using the Hymn of True Dragon Slaying. That attempt has been reflected in his body, causing his mana heart to expand. Due to this expansion, his physical constitution has changed significantly, and Adrian's body is now able to endure much more mana. This physical evolution has also elevated his skill, allowing him to reach the stage of sword expert. His connection to his origin has improved, and some of the restrictions on his recovered authorities have been lifted. Specifically, his third eye and third ear authorities have been significantly improved. His meditation is interrupted by the voice of his maid, Adelia, who looks at him with concern. With a confident smirk, Gruhorn clenches his fist, realizing he has taken another step forward in his growth. Their journey eventually brings them to a grand mansion in Ellen County. Gruhorn maintains a neutral expression as he is greeted with the utmost reverence. 2 men bow deeply, introducing themselves as Edgar of the Ellen family and his eldest son, Torrance. After Gruhorn thanks them for their hospitality, Edgar offers to guide the prince to his room to rest after the long journey. As they walk, Gruhorn internally assesses the weapons on display, noting that while plentiful, they are all low-grade, flashy items that would be useless in actual combat. Edgar proudly leads the procession through the weapon-filled halls. Gruhorn concludes that it will be difficult to find what he is looking for in this place. He asks Edgar if the Blacksmiths Guild is located within the territory, a question that seems to make his host uneasy. Gruhorn then declares his intention to visit the guild, much to Edgar's apparent concern. Edgar attempts to manage the prince's expectations, explaining that blacksmiths are by nature a rough and stubborn people. He warns that they are often so focused on their work that they will ignore even the Lord, and asks Gruhorn to show generosity if their words are as crude as the iron they handle. The scene shifts to the fiery heart of the Blacksmiths Guild. Inside, the workshop is a hive of activity, and Edgar expresses concern over the intense heat from the furnaces. But Gruhorn is unfazed, completely absorbed by the rhythmic sound of hammering that fills the air. Edgar calls out to the prince, noticing his captivated state. The forge is a symphony of clamoring flames and hissing bellows. Gruhorn walks through the chaos, surrounded by the raw energy of creation as the blacksmiths hammer the glowing iron. Among the many sounds of the workshop, something specific catches his attention. He isolates one exceptionally clear and powerful strike that stands out from all the rest. His focus narrows onto a single shirtless blacksmith, whose hammer strikes with singular purpose. Gruhorn recognizes the power in the old man's work. The sound triggers a deep and ancient memory, the very moment of his own forging. The intensity of the recollection leaves him shaken and sweating. Adelia, ever watchful, approaches and expresses her concern over his condition. She gently wipes the sweat from his brow, pulling him back to the present moment. As the elderly blacksmith continues his work, the rest of the guild stops to acknowledge the royal party's presence. A man with a mustache steps forward, offering a humble greeting on behalf of all the blacksmiths. Edgar introduces the man as Zaxxon, the head of the Blacksmith Guild, which Gruhorn notes with a simple acknowledgement. But Gruhorn's attention remains fixed on the old master, who ignores the prince completely, lost in the rhythm of his craft. The guild head Zaxon furiously demands that the old master stop his work and bow to his highness the prince. Before he can finish, Gruhorn grabs his face and silences him, coldly stating that he's being too loud. On the anvil, the glowing hot metal waits. Gruhorn turns away, annoyed that the blacksmiths were clearly dragged from their work for a ceremony he never ordered. He addresses the other craftsmen, warning them that the iron will cool if they continue to stand idle. His words send the blacksmiths scrambling back to their stations, shouting at each other to grab their tools and work the bellows. Gruhorn watches them with a quiet, authoritative presence. The old master, completely unfazed by the commotion, continues to shape the glowing blade. His hammer falls with practiced, powerful strikes, sending sparks flying through the forge. Gruhorn remains completely captivated, his gaze fixed on the master craftsman's unwavering focus. The intense heat of the forge seems to surround Gruhorn, reflecting the fire he feels within. His focus narrows, completely absorbed by the vision of the old master working at his anvil. He questions the powerful and unfamiliar sensation that has taken hold of him. As they walk away, Edgar explains that for the last 6 months, the master has been endlessly forging swords only to melt them down again. Gruhorn asks if they are failures, but Edgar confesses that it is hard to say. He reveals that every sword the man creates is a masterpiece, earning him the title of the Master Smith of Swords. Edgar adds that the swords he saw were flawless, making it a true mystery why the master keeps destroying them. He continues, explaining that for the past month the old man has barely slept, clinging only to his work. Edgar voices his concern for the master's health, a sentiment Gruhorn silently absorbs. Gruhorn reflects on the man's dedication, recognizing him as a true craftsman. Several days pass during which Gruhorn establishes a routine of visiting the forge from early morning until late at night. Throughout this time, the Master Smith of Swords continues his relentless work without pause, and the prince simply watches him in silent, captivated observation. Edgar notes that, contrary to the tension expected from a royal visit, the days have been surprisingly uneventful. Finally, the day of the prince's departure arrives, and still, the master's hammer rings through the forge. Gruhorn expresses his disappointment, having hoped to see the sword completed before he had to leave. He is filled with a deep sense of regret. Vale approaches, informing him that it is time to go, as there is a farewell party that evening before their early departure. Edgar silently wishes that the prince could have seen the master's completed work, even for a moment. Just then, Edgar comes running, excitedly announcing that the master smith has finally completed the sword. Gruhorn looks up in stunned disbelief at the sudden news. Against the setting sun, the Master Smith of Swords stands with his completed masterpiece. He carefully wipes the blade, giving it a final polish. The finished sword gleams, a flawless creation reflecting the light. The master then approaches Gruhorn and kneels, presenting the sword to him. He declares that he is dedicating this sword to his highness. Gruhorn looks down, his expression unreadable as he takes in the master's offering. The master explains the process, to heat it like the rising sun, then to cool it until its color matches the crimson of a king's robes. He concludes that by doing so, a sword worthy of both the sun and a king will be born. Gruhorn examines the blade, asking if it has a name. The master craftsman, looking exhausted, suggests the name Twilight. He explains its dual meaning. For him, it represents the dusk of his life, but for his highness, it signifies a new dawn. Gruhorn is amused, remarking that the blacksmith is surprisingly eloquent. The master smiles faintly. He suddenly collapses, whispering that it's a relief as Gruhorn catches him. As his shocked entourage looks on, Gruhorn orders a message be sent to Vale, informing him that he will be staying the night. That evening, royal knights stand guard outside the forge. Later, at the master's bedside, the old man explains that the sword seemed to take shape by destiny the moment the prince arrived. He believes the sword itself chose the day of its birth, a sentiment that Gruhorn quietly questions. Gruhorn then begins to reveal a profound truth to the old master. He leans in close, whispering the secret of his true nature into the craftsman's ear. The blacksmith is stunned into silence, realizing who the prince truly is, and Gruhorn confirms it, explaining this is why he understood the master's heart. The old man is left breathless by the revelation. A look of peaceful understanding finally settles on his face. He then asks the prince to hand him the sword for a moment. Gruhorn obliges, placing the masterpiece back into the hands of its creator. The blacksmith grips the hilt with renewed purpose. Holding the sword, he begins to offer a final blessing. He wishes for the sword to become as great as the master who now wields it. Gruhorn accepts the blessing, confidently stating that it certainly will. With the blessing complete, Gruhorn returns to the master's bedside. The old craftsman falls into a deep, peaceful sleep. The next day, their journey from Ellen County is set to resume. Before they depart, Lord Edgar presents Gruhorn with a gift. He explains that while a sword forged with a master's soul is priceless, it might be inconvenient for a prince to use. Instead, he offers a magic sword from his own collection as a more suitable alternative. Gruhorn inspects the blade, appraising it as a decent middle-grade weapon. He notes that receiving a masterpiece was already a great gift, so Edgar's offer of an additional magic sword is truly remarkable. Gruhorn praises the exceptional loyalty of the Ellen family, leaving Lord Edgar flustered but deeply pleased. Lord Edgar declares it an honor for his family, but Gruhorn internally laments that his plan to use the magic sword as bait has failed, leaving him out one perfectly good weapon. With their business concluded, Vale orders his men to prepare for departure, explaining that the cavalry will ride ahead at maximum speed to make up for lost time. Gruhorn silently acknowledges the command from inside the carriage. Vale then makes an observation, noting that he didn't see Gruhorn at all during their stay, to which the prince explains he was on a separate assignment from the king. This makes Gruhorn realize that his little side trip wasn't entirely free after all. Vale tells him to get ready, as they'll be riding hard to reach Iron Lion Castle by nightfall, which means Gruhorn will need to ride a horse. The prince awkwardly admits that he doesn't know how to ride. The entire retinue is stunned into silence as Gruhorn internally reminds himself that as a former sword, he's never had the occasion to learn. The journey to Iron Lion Castle proves to be a difficult one for the prince. He struggles with motion sickness and has a less than graceful experience learning to ride, despite a few twists and turns along the way, and the prince's severe motion sickness. They manage to reach their destination, Iron Lion Castle, in about a full day. Gruhorn takes in the sight of the formidable fortress. They are greeted by a man named York of the Walloden family, who announces that the Iron Lions welcome the noble blood of Leonberg. Gruhorn smirks, noting that their spirit seems a bit excessive. He knows the reason for their tense demeanor. It's because of the presence of his personal knight, Arwen Kurgien. Deciding to stir the pot, he steps forward and calls out her name. Arwen respectfully bows her head and greets Her Highness. Arwen declares that she has been counting the days, waiting solely to see him again. Her words immediately stoke the fury of the other knights, a reaction Gruhorn notes with amusement. But the knight's hostility triggers an unexpected response from his maid, Adelia, whose eyes glow with protective menace. Realizing the danger, Gruhorn quickly intervenes, calling Adelia's name to stop her from acting. She instantly calms down, and Gruhorn internally praises his foresight in establishing his absolute authority over her. With the situation under control, he turns his attention back to the knights. He orders Arwen to follow him. With a provocative grin, he suggests they have much to discuss, and invites the hostile knights behind her to join them as well. Later, dressed for training and armed with a wooden sword, Gruhorn prepares to make his point. He stands before the assembled Iron Lions and formally challenges them, asking to witness the swordsmanship that is supposedly the best in the kingdom. He tells the knights that if his royal position makes them hesitant, he will stake the Leonberg name on it, promising no one will be held responsible for the outcome of the spar, and asks if there are still no takers. He mocks their faint-heartedness, suggesting their title as the kingdom's best is nothing but a bluff. His taunt works, and a furious red-haired knight steps forward, introducing himself as Dale of the Dennant family. He humbly states that while he feels he is not worthy to represent the entire order, he will dare to stand before the prince. Gruhorn coolly replies that there is no need for permission, as he was the one who asked for the duel first. With a final warning for the prince to be careful, Dale charges forward. Gruhorn watches him approach, completely unfazed. The knight's powerful strike is met with an effortless block, as a surge of blue energy erupts from the impact. With a single, overwhelming counter, Gruhorn sends Dale flying, crashing him into the ground in a decisive defeat. A blue aura glows on his chest as he smirks, calmly calling for the next challenger. The other Iron Lion knights can only stare in disbelief at their fallen comrade. Enraged, another knight named Paul Rothheim steps forward, declaring that, unlike the first-year Dale, he is a third-year apprentice. His seniority means nothing, as he is immediately struck down with the same effortless ease. One by one, more knights step up, a fifth year named Hallie, an eighth year named Judith, all shouting their credentials before being instantly defeated. Gruhorn remains perfectly composed, casually deflecting every attack. In moments, the training ground is littered with the unconscious bodies of the apprentice knights. Gruhorn looks on with an expression of pure boredom. He then addresses the remaining knights, stating he'd like to face the official knights now and taunting them for being so slow to act. Gruhorn then calls out to Arwen. He informs her that when he returns, she will be coming with him. Arwen immediately bows, accepting his command without question. Gruhorn smirks, finding it all too easy, as an official knight with white hair steps forward. The knight remarks that he has heard the prince enjoys wagers and suggests a small bet to liven things up. He begins to propose that if he defeats the prince, he will claim Arwen, but Gruhorn instantly denies the offer. He states firmly that Arwen is not a tournament prize, a declaration that visibly moves her. Gruhorn suggests betting on something else instead and orders his knight Carl to bring him a sword. Carl presents an ornate blade which Gruhorn takes, explaining that if the knight wins, he will give him this very sword as his prize. Arwen tries to protest, but Gruhorn cuts her off, telling her she is 1,000 times more precious than the sword. He explains that the value of a swordmaster cannot be compared to a mere weapon, leaving Arwen speechless and deeply moved. The white-haired knight smirks and accepts the terms of the duel. He introduces himself as Dunham of the Fahrenheit family, an official knight on the verge of achieving triple chain. Gruhorn cheekily points out that this means Dunham is still just a double-chain knight, much to his opponent's annoyance. Dunham recovers and presents his own weapon, identifying it as the 17th sword made by the legendary Master Smith of Swords. With a confident smile, Gruhorn notes what a coincidence that is. He reveals that he also has a sword from that master, drawing his own new blade, Twilight. Gruhorn declares that his sword is the Master Smith's 100th work, a claim that stuns Dunham, who has never heard of such a blade. The prince explains that it was the master's final work, completed just a few days prior, as Dunham's sword begins to crackle with energy. Dunham states that while he believes the prince walks a misguided path, he can recognize the ceaseless effort imbued within it. Gruhorn smirks, amused by the knight's assessment of his path. He then dismisses this judgment as utterly insignificant. Dunham explains that his position was never truly his own to begin with. Adelia watches on, realizing the knight's respect is directed at her. Gruhorn clarifies that the only respect he needs is from his own people. He then turns to Adelia, instructing her to watch the duel closely. A massive torrent of blue energy erupts from Gruhorn's body. A spectral knight forms behind him, as he declares that this is the path Adelia must now walk. In response, Adelia is enveloped in a brilliant golden aura, her own power resonating with his. Adelia accepts her master's command with unwavering resolve. Elsewhere, Vale sits with a companion who asks how many times they have visited Iron Lion Castle, and Vale confirms this is their 4th visit. Vale falls into deep thought. His companion recounts the visits from the other princes, noting that Adrian was the only one who never showed any interest in the Iron Lions. He slams his cup down, angrily stating that regardless of his reputation, Adrian was still the legitimate heir to the kingdom. He furiously accuses Vale of bearing a large share of the blame for the prince's situation. He argues that if Vale, as the commander of the 3rd Legion, had offered even a little support, the prince would not have become so isolated. He demands to know why Vale is only acting like a guardian now, to which Vale somberly admits that he did indeed cast his nephew aside. A flashback reveals the original Prince Adrian as a drunken tyrant, a ruler Vale believed would be utterly incompetent. He recalls a time he had to physically confront the prince, who was intoxicated by some wicked potion. Vale recalls the prince's foolish, unrestrained anger. In his rage, the prince had even charged at his own uncle with a sword. Vale saw him as nothing more than a hopeless scoundrel. After Vale returned to the north in disappointment, his nephew sent him poisoned wine with a letter, shamelessly calling it a gift. Vale remembers using his mana to burn away the cheap poison as he drank it. In that moment, he burned away any last shred of familial affection he had for the boy. However, that same scoundrel has now changed, enduring grueling training and growing stronger every day. His companion reminds him that Vale himself once declared the first prince must never become king. Vale clenches his fist, reflecting that the boy is now a completely different person from his past self. He resolves to give his nephew a chance, at least enough to let him stand at the same starting line as the other princes. His companion implores him to reconsider his stance. He admits that he simply does not understand the situation. He confesses that he has no idea whether it is Vale or the first prince who has truly changed. Their conversation is interrupted as York of the Walladon family bursts into the room in a panic. He urgently reports that something has happened involving the first prince. As they walk towards the training grounds, Vale's companion reassures him that Dunham knows his limits and nothing serious will happen. He confidently adds that even in a live blade duel, Dunham would never beat royalty senseless. Vale calmly corrects him, stating that it is not the prince he should be worried about, but his knight. The companion is confused, noting that Vale looks pale and is speaking nonsense. In that instant, his words are proven wrong as Dunham is sent crashing to the ground in a brutal defeat. The knights stare in disbelief at their fallen comrade Dunham. The entire training ground is stunned as they realize that even their strongest official knight has been defeated, and the prince has won yet again. Vale's companion is left speechless by the outcome, prompting a smug Vale to remind him of his earlier warning. He calmly reiterates that Dunham was never the one to worry about, as Gruhorn, wreathed in blue energy, calls for his next opponent. Gruhorn recalls his uncle's teachings, remembering that a knight's true power only begins to manifest at the level of 2 rings. He acknowledges that this was no exaggeration, as the power of a double-chain knight is formidable. However, Gruhorn realizes his current hymn of sparring is insufficient, yet he cannot justify using his ultimate hymn of true dragon slaying on a mere knight. Faced with this dilemma, he activates his hyper-focus trait as Dunham lunges forward. In an instant, the world around him goes quiet as he enters a state of absolute concentration. He feels a sense of detachment, as if his body is moving with a will of its own. He recognizes this sensation as the same one he experienced in the past. As Dunham lunges, Gruhorn's body moves on pure instinct, easily evading the attack. The 2 swordsmen clash in a massive explosion of blue energy. The result is instantaneous. Dunham is sent flying backwards, his armor shattering from the force of the blow. Gruhorn exhales, a confident smirk on his face. He looks over the fallen knight and the stunned crowd, contemptuously calling for the next challenger. The duel becomes a blur of motion as Gruhorn relentlessly presses his assault. Dunham is completely overwhelmed, barely able to defend against the prince's ferocious attacks. With a final, powerful strike, Gruhorn breaks through his opponent's guard. His eyes glow with an intense blue light, a sign of his absolute mastery of the moment. He continues his relentless assault, effortlessly dispatching another Iron Lion Knight. With absolute focus, he parries every blow that comes his way. A look of cold satisfaction crosses his face as the battle concludes. He stands victorious, surrounded by the fallen knights of the Iron Lion Order. The intense series of duels has left him panting and exhausted. His display of power continues in the days that follow as he racks up 5 consecutive victories in sparring matches, defeating a knight named Peyton. Through these countless bouts, he has endured and grown, steeling his resolve to face any challenge. This relentless training triggers an evolution, adding a new verse to his hymn of sparring. The system confirms his achievement. The hymn of sparring has been elevated to the extraordinary grade. Gruhorn looks on with satisfaction, knowing he has successfully forged his new power. As Gruhorn kneels in exhaustion, one of the knights approaches, asking if he is all right. The knight then kneels before him, paying his respects to the prince's hard-earned victory. In a stunning reversal, the rest of the Iron Lion Knights erupt in cheers, saluting the prince's sword and his indomitable fighting spirit. Gruhorn is left completely bewildered, wondering why the men who wanted to tear him apart just moments ago are now cheering for him. Watching from the sidelines, Vale's companion explains that the knights are simple men by nature. He elaborates that nothing excites them more than the thrill of the sword and a true victory. Vale notes Gruhorn's confused expression, correctly guessing that the prince expected to earn their resentment. He explains their warrior's code. A fair defeat is more valuable than a cheap victory, and the outcome doesn't matter when both sides have fought their hardest. The apprentice knights laugh, joking that Dunham might be a little resentful, since he now has to hand over the sword he bragged so much about. Gruhorn reflects on this, realizing that the warrior's values he once held dear were not forgotten and abandoned, along with the monoheart theory after all. He reflects that it seems at least one thing from his era has not changed. The timeless spirit of the knights, to be gracious in defeat and to revere the strong, has endured. Sometime later, Gruhorn and his party prepare to depart from Iron Lion Castle. He bids the knights farewell, expressing his hope that they will meet again. York of the Walladon family bows deeply, wishing the prince good health, and Gruhorn returns the pleasantry. As he turns to leave, Gruhorn stops with one final request for the Count. He asks York to keep the events of his stay a secret, which confuses the Count, who asks if it wouldn't be more beneficial to make his achievements known. Gruhorn's true motive is revealed. He wants to keep his power hidden to surprise his rival, Prince Jillian. As evening falls on their journey, Vale announces that the party will make camp for the night. Arwen informs her master that she will scout the surroundings, and Gruhorn gives her the command to proceed. As Arwen departs, Gruhorn watches her go, confident that she will adapt to her new role soon enough. Feeling the fatigue of the day, he yawns and decides to head into his tent to rest. Inside, he is greeted by his maid Adelia, who welcomes him back. Gruhorn feels a flash of irritation, internally complaining that the S-rank sword genius he recruited is still acting like a common maid. He walks past her with a sigh, prompting a concerned Adelia to ask if he is displeased with something. Flopping onto his bed, he dismisses her concerns and tells her to leave, which she dutifully accepts. Alone with his thoughts, Gruhorn reflects on the Iron Lion Knights, admitting they were not what he had expected. He recalls using his judgment authority, which revealed that the majority of the knights possessed swordsmanship talent no higher than B grade. In his past life, individuals with such talent would have barely reached an intermediate level even after a lifetime of grueling training, fated to fade into obscurity. Yet, in this new era, these same people have achieved a level equivalent to a sword expert while still in their 20s and 30s, a fact that gives him pause. He concludes that while the caliber of superhumans has declined, the potential of ordinary people has risen dramatically. He identifies the sole reason for this shift: the existence of the mana chain system. He thinks of his uncle, Vale, a man who could have aimed for true transcendence in the old era, and recalls his initial displeasure at seeing him throw away that potential. However, he now understands that this new era offers no path to build achievements beyond the extraordinary grade. Ultimately, he accepts that this is simply the natural flow of time. He humbly admits that he does not know this era well and resolves to start learning again from the very beginning. Suddenly, his uncle's voice cuts through his thoughts, commending him on his new mindset. Vale tells him it is not too late, and that if he puts in the effort, he can still achieve his dream, leaving Gruhorn completely confused. He then asks if Gruhorn has not already won the hearts of the Iron Lion Knights, noting that the other princes would never have been able to connect with them so casually. With a proud smile, Vale praises his nephew's wise judgment, calling him by his childhood name, Ian. Gruhorn is completely taken aback by his uncle's sudden change in demeanor. He frantically asks his uncle if he has lost his mind, reminding him of the conditions of the bet they made. When Gruhorn asks if he means the bet about defeating the third prince, Vale calmly denies it. Vale clarifies that their original bet was simply to defeat a double-chain knight, a condition Gruhorn has already fulfilled by defeating Dunham. With his nephew's victory confirmed, Vale states that he will now uphold his end of the bargain. He formally introduces himself by his full name and titles, Vale Balorhard, Count of the Kingdom and Commander of the Third Legion. He then makes a stunning declaration, pledging his official support to the first prince, Adrian Leonberg, leaving Gruhorn utterly baffled. The full weight of his uncle's declaration hits him, and his confusion turns to pure horror. He realizes with dawning dread that his uncle now believes he is vying for the throne, a position he never wanted. As Gruhorn predicted, his uncle's declaration of support sends shockwaves through the kingdom, immediately changing his political standing. Knights and maids flock to him, offering their sincere congratulations and declaring his new standing a joy for the kingdom. Newly assigned royal knights and soldiers create a commotion, and new attendants and servants sent from the palace bustle about. Gruhorn finds himself standing at the center of it all, completely overwhelmed. He erupts in a furious tantrum, demanding that they all be sent back immediately. Carl calmly explains that they have come by royal decree and will not leave, prompting Gruhorn to scream for them to at least get out of his sight. Finally finding a moment of peace, he relaxes in a private study, but his quiet is instantly shattered as a figure bursts in, calling out for his brother. Gruhorn looks up with pure irritation, asking why his visitor is here now. The intruder is revealed to be the third prince, Jillian, who sarcastically congratulates Gruhorn for playing the fool while secretly learning swordsmanship and revealing such grand ambitions. Jillian smugly adds that he intended to save Gruhorn's face by allowing him a graceful defeat, as Gruhorn sarcastically expresses his gratitude. His demeanor shifts to pure rage as he declares that Gruhorn has made a grave mistake and will pay dearly for the deception. Overwhelmed, Gruhorn internally insists he has no interest in the throne and resolves to find the person responsible for this mess. His search for the culprit leads him directly to his uncle Vale. Gruhorn states that he will play along for now, but demands that Vale find a way to back out later, reaffirming he has no desire for the crown. Vale smirks, asking if his nephew is worried about the fate of the Ballarhard family name. He explains that his family serves as the kingdom's essential shield, protecting it from the monstrous hordes of the northern mountains. He confidently states that as long as the royalty and nobles remember this constant threat, his family's position is secure. Gruhorn seems relieved by this assurance, as Vale explains that this political move was always inevitable. Vale then challenges him, asking if he is truly unaware of the grim fate that befalls a firstborn prince who fails to claim the throne, warning that inaction will not change his circumstances. Vale offers to give his nephew as much time as he needs to accept the situation, but adds a final thought. He delivers a chilling reminder that the legitimacy of the firstborn prince only disappears upon death. Alone in his room, Gruhorn sighs, convinced that no amount of time will ever change his mind. He reflects on his true purpose, which is to reclaim the authority and transcendent power he once possessed. Compared to that grand ambition, he considers the right of succession to the throne to be a trivial matter. He recalls his past certainty as the scene shifts to a grand, opulent ballroom filled with nobles. A royal announcer's voice echoes through the hall, heralding the arrival of the legitimate bloodline of the Leonberg kingdom. The announcer formally presents His Highness the First Prince, Adrian Leonberg, as he appears before the assembled court. The crowd of nobles looks on with a mixture of expressions, from nervous smiles to stern glares. Among them, a mysterious woman in a purple hood watches with a sinister, knowing smile. This all leads to the banquet, where his transformation is put on full display. He makes his entrance, descending the grand staircase with a newfound confidence. The nobles immediately begin to flatter him, remarking how his dignified appearance resembles a young king, but Gruhorn internally scoffs at their fawning over his weight loss. He looks upon them with disdain, questioning if these are truly the kingdom's elite. Using his unique perception, he sees their true nature, labeling them all as a joke. He identifies the trait as the heart of a serpent, a mark of evil karma accumulated by those who steal from others and trample upon lives. Amidst the sea of corruption, he notes that only one small group seems worth his attention. He cheerfully approaches the orange-haired man, calling him Taylor and asking why he didn't come to greet him, leaving the young noble utterly shocked. Taylor nervously thanks the prince for the invitation, as Gruhorn identifies them as individuals who, while not yet competent, are at least uncorrupted. With a satisfied smile, Gruhorn decides they are sufficient to serve as vessels for the seeds of his future plans. A royal guard calls for attention. He announces the grand entrance of Ambassador Couillon de Bourgogne-Montpellier, whose authority has been recognized by the emperor. The name catches Gruhorn completely off guard. As the ambassador makes his way through the hall, all the nobles, including Taylor's group, bow their heads in respect. The man is identified as Ambassador Couillon de Bourgogne-Montpellier of the Bourgogne Empire. He approaches Gruhorn with a smug smile, remarking that it has been a while since they last met. The name Bourgogne triggers a deep memory within Gruhorn, recalling the ancient nemesis that his comrade Leonberg fought against for 400 years. His eyes flare with a cold blue light as he remembers the countless scars that name has left upon this kingdom. As his internal rage builds, an oblivious guest suddenly collides with him, spilling a glass of red wine all over his uniform. Gruhorn is left standing in stunned silence, drenched and dripping from the unexpected accident. The clumsy guest panics, asking if the prince is all right and explaining he was just in a hurry to greet him. He offers a sincere apology for the accident. The ambassador from the Bourgogne Empire and his entourage watch the scene with disdain. The entire banquet hall turns to watch the awkward exchange. Gruhorn calmly states that he will have to change his clothes, while the guest continues to apologize, blaming his old body for the grave discourtesy. Arwen steps forward, offering to escort her master, as Gruhorn quietly asks for the man's identity. She identifies the apologetic noble as His Excellency Marquis Bielefeld. Wiping the wine from his face, Gruhorn muses that not all nobles are rotten and admits the incident has helped him cool his head. Later, in a private room, his uncle Vale enters, stating that he heard there was an incident. Vale reveals that Marquis Bielefeld told him the prince looked like he was about to cause some trouble. Gruhorn realizes the Marquise's warning was not nonsense. Vale confronts him, asking what he was thinking, but Gruhorn denies being reckless, explaining that he simply couldn't understand the situation. He recounts how the wicked House Bourgogne flaunted its power, earning more sincere respect from the nobles than they ever show to their own royalty. The atmosphere was too tense for peace, and the relationship too one-sided to be considered an alliance. He angrily questions how the kingdom could have fallen into such a pathetic state. Vale calmly replies that the history behind it is not particularly special. He explains that in the past, the kingdom stood firm against the empire's numerous invasions, with outstanding knights stepping forward to repel them. However, as time passed, the empire's power grew, and the gap between the two nations widened. Eventually, before the might of the superpower empire, the kingdom had no choice but to kneel. A look of dawning horror crosses Gruhorn's face as he asks if their submission was because of that incident. Vale explains that despite being a small country on the continent's outskirts, the kingdom possessed a unique strength that allowed them to face the mighty empire. This strength was built upon a flawless accumulation of achievements since the nation's founding, ranging from ordinary moments to heroic tales and legendary battles. Their power even reached the level of myths, all thanks to a unique ability known as martial hymns. But Vale grimly concludes that in the present day, they have lost all of it. After a moment of silence, Gruhorn addresses his uncle, stating that he has changed his mind. Vale, confused by the sudden declaration, asks for clarification. With newfound resolve, Gruhorn announces his decision. He is going to try being a king. He acknowledges that he might regret this choice, but he feels it is something he must do. After all, in his past life, he feels he practically built half of this country himself. The scene then shifts to the second day of the royal banquet. A herald announces the grand entrance of His Highness, First Prince Adrian Leonberg, and Lord Vale of the northern Balerhard County. The assembled nobles offer a lukewarm and dismissive reception. Gruhorn internally scoffs at their sloppy etiquette, finding it disrespectful. He is reminded of his old friend Leonberg, recalling that no one ever believed he would become king. Leonberg was merely a country boy from a backwater village, not even a particularly upstanding figure among the common folk. Nevertheless, the boy stepped forward to stand before the people. Inspired by this memory, Gruhorn resolves to do the same, just as his friend once did. He addresses the court, calling them those who have eyes but cannot see. A powerful blue aura erupts from his body, swirling through the grand hall. Declaring that he stands tall before this flock of sheep, he begins to sing the hymn of the king, though his current body can only handle a quarter of its true power. He endures the strain, reasoning that this hero-grade hymn is bearable compared to the myth-grade hymn of true dragon slaying. However, he reflects that for this situation, no hymn is more fitting. The entire court is left speechless by this overwhelming display of authority. As the nobles bow under the pressure, Gruhorn decides his display of power is sufficient. He begins to dismiss them, when a strange, dark energy suddenly fills the room. The mysterious woman in the purple hood reveals herself to be an elf, expressing surprise that someone still remembers the hymns. Gruhorn realizes she is not just any elf. He recognizes the woman standing before him. His composure shatters as he wonders in horror why that particular madwoman is here.
Elves are known as God's most beautiful creation, a benevolent race of long-lived forest gardeners. This is the idyllic image people conjure when they hear the word elf. However, the reality is that they are a cruel race that uses their beauty as bait. The most dangerous among them are the High Elves, born with heroic-grade power from birth. The man now stands before a woman who is far more than just a regular High Elf. She is an elder High Elf named Sigrun, the dancing magic swordswoman who has lived for 1,000 years. A legendary member of the party that slew the Mad Dragon, she once made a sinister proposal to her sword. This is the very same lunatic who tormented the sword to an unimaginable degree. The man who was once that sword worries if she could possibly recognize him after he recited a hymn she knows well. Sigrun questions him, remarking on how strangely familiar he feels. The man attempts to feign ignorance, claiming this is his first time seeing an elf. But Sigrun immediately calls out his lie. He tenses, remembering that even 400 years ago, she was a terrifyingly powerful being. She approaches, explaining that humans typically have one of two reactions upon meeting an elf. Most are simply captivated by their beauty, while those with a high level of martial understanding become wary and apprehensive. She gestures toward him and observes that he doesn't seem to possess that level of martial prowess. He catches her hand, coolly replying that his tastes are just a bit unique. The brief encounter ends and she bids him farewell. He lets out a quiet sigh of relief, having survived for now. His attention turns to the candidates for his consort, but the first is far too young. The next is too shy, hiding behind her mother's dress. Another seems to have arrived ready for a brawl. The next candidate is also just a toddler. The entire selection process is clearly exhausting the queen. She lectures him on the proper qualities of a consort, a woman of wisdom and good standing. Their discussion is cut short when a royal aide announces that the elf delegation is requesting an audience. A group of cloaked figures approaches the throne. The leader reveals herself to be Sigrun, offering a formal greeting to Queen Margarita. Queen Margarita expresses her surprise, noting the rarity of an elven visit to the kingdom. Sigrun cuts to the chase, inquiring if the queen is indeed searching for a spouse for the prince. With a knowing smile, she presents herself as a high elf. She equates her status to that of a prestigious human noble, as the man silently questions her motives. She then makes the audacious claim that her age is not far from his own. The man internally scoffs at the thousand-year lie, while Sigrun continues her pitch as the ideal, well-protected consort. She looks directly at him, professing that she felt their fates were intertwined from their very first meeting. He is forced to reconsider her words, remembering that elves are said to never lie about fate. The queen is taken aback by the sheer boldness of the proposal. The court begins to whisper, realizing the profound implications of a fated marriage alliance with the elves. Suddenly, the man grabs her by the wrist. He pulls her away, insisting they need to talk for a moment. The court is scandalized by his insolence. Once alone, he confronts her directly. She coyly claims her only goal is to foster friendship. He asks again, addressing her by her full title. He reveals he knows her true role as the Blade of the Mistletoe clan. He questions if she's here for an investigation or an execution. Her playful facade drops, replaced by a dangerous curiosity. He remains silent, realizing his mistake. He realizes she is a monster whose power he cannot even begin to fathom. Her sense of fate means she is powerful enough to glimpse the past etched into his soul. She taunts him, questioning the wisdom of staying silent before an executioner. He smirks, replying that he is well aware that it is equally foolish to run one's mouth. He then demands that Sigrun stop her games and not interfere with his fate. He knows that if he remains merely an object of mild curiosity, the lunatic elf will eventually destroy him. His only path is to garner her full interest, becoming something too precious to simply discard. His change in demeanor piques her curiosity, and she asks who he really is. He offers a vague answer, painting himself as a pitiful prince and leaving his true nature a mystery. He smirks, telling her to simply wait and see if she's truly curious. Sigrun turns, admitting she always felt something was strange about this trivial mission. But now, with a look of manic glee, she realizes he is the very reason she was sent. He recoils in disgust, reminded of just how creepy she has always been. They walk back into the throne room together. The court gasps as they see the two holding hands. They present a united front, walking arm in arm. He turns to address his mother, the queen, and boldly declares that he will be engaged to Sigrun. He internally cringes, disgusted that he had to utter her name with such false affection. He reasons that for now, he cannot defy Sigrun's interest, seeing the engagement as a way to buy more time. He addresses the queen, suggesting they take a period of observation before finalizing such an important matter. Queen Margarita agrees, a decision he knows she will use to calculate the political value of this alliance. For Sigrun, he understands this time is merely for her new delicacy to ripen. And as for himself, he will use this time to build the power he needs to escape the clutches of the insane elf. Elsewhere, a hand smashes a teacup in fury. A nobleman seethes in his office, cursing the prince and his God-given birthright. He pants, consumed by rage. He recalls how his uncle suddenly declared support for the prince, who then took the coveted flower of Iron Lion Castle. He fumes that the prince now dares to go after the elf, admitting he underestimated her otherworldly presence. He recalls the duel he has scheduled with the prince, plotting to maim him just enough to avoid the complications of murder. With a sinister grin, he vows to completely trample his rival. On the day of the duel, a stern, silver-haired knight commander oversees the proceedings. He introduces himself as Sturmhilde Stuttgart, notarizing the duel to ensure no one can object to the results. The prince, however, seems completely unimpressed, letting out a bored yawn at all the ceremony. His opponent smirks, revealing he's brought spectators to witness the prince's humiliation. The prince glances at the assembled crowd, remarking that his opponent talks far too much. His words strike a nerve, and the nobleman's aura flares with anger. He vows to silence the prince for good and lunges forward to begin the duel. He admits he had intended to toy with his opponent for a while, but explains that recent events have left him with little time to waste. In a single, overwhelming blow, he sends the nobleman crashing to the ground. The knight commander, Sturmhilde, watches in disbelief, questioning if this is truly the same prince he once knew. The prince remains utterly unfazed. He turns his back on his defeated rival. Sturmhilde officially declares that the third prince is unable to continue the duel. He announces the first prince as the victor, shocking the onlookers. The prince scoffs internally at the nobles who gathered to watch what he considers a childish squabble. The crowd murmurs in shock, unable to believe that the promising Prince Gillian was defeated by someone who had only been training for a few months. Prince Gillian's eyes widen in disbelief and fury. He erupts in a rage, cursing the first prince for his humiliation. He storms through his manor, demanding his gear and vowing to settle the score. A servant attempts to get his attention, but Gillian snaps back impatiently. The servant reports that the first prince has already left the capital with Count Balorhard. The prince's procession travels through the cold northern territories, the home of the Balorhard family. On the road, Count Balorhard compliments the prince's improved horsemanship, only to be met with a smug reply. The count then questions the prince's haste in leaving the capital. The prince explains that after the recent events, there is no place for him there. He has no intention of pathetically clinging to nobles who fawn over the empire instead of recognizing their own country's master. Count Balorhard questions this strategy, suggesting soldiers might be more suitable allies than nobles, though he warns they are conservative and difficult to win over. The prince smirks, confident that by sharing hardships and fighting alongside them, he can forge bonds of loyalty. The count remains unconvinced, finding the prince's approach far too brash. But the prince knows he cannot afford to dawdle, haunted by the image of the lunatic elf and the ruin she brings to all who catch her interest. He must build his own strength before that fate befalls him, a task impossible within the peaceful capital. In order to accelerate his growth and to sharpen his sword, he must travel to the place where humans are tested most, the very place where the most powerful martial hymns were born. He knows the place he is destined to be is the battlefield. Count Balorhard points to the distant peaks, identifying them as the Blade Mountains, a border his family has defended for generations. The prince shivers in the biting cold, prompting the count to suggest he take shelter in the carriage. But the prince refuses, determined to acclimate himself to the harsh northern climate. His attention then turns to an old man occupying an entire carriage, questioning why he's even accompanying them. The man cheerfully explains it's a rare chance to see the north, promising the book he's writing will be of use, much to the prince's annoyance. His gaze then falls upon a female knight at the head of the column. He rides up to her, placing a hand on her shoulder and asking if she's all right in the cold. The knight Arwen insists she is fine, stating that a knight cannot seek comfort over duty. The prince gives a slight smirk, pleased that at least one person in his retinue is full of drive. Arwen looks away, her cheeks flushed but her expression resolute. On the other hand, he glances back at the rest of his escort. The other knights are clearly unhappy, forced to be here by royal decree, and he laments the absence of his aide, Karl, who could have managed them. He recalls his father, the king, sternly reminding him that the royal knighthood does not serve as his personal guard. The king had questioned his decision to bring in his own men, doubting he even treated them as true knights, prompting the prince's silent frustration. This is why Karl was unable to follow him, a decision the prince finds overly harsh, suspecting there's a deeper reason for his father's attitude. He rides on, certain there is a backstory he does not yet understand. Count Balorhard urges them to increase their speed. He warns that they risk being trapped if the blizzard worsens. The snow quickly turns into a blinding storm, forcing them into a grueling march where even voices are lost to the wind. The count glances back, his expression filled with concern. The prince shouts an order, telling them to abandon the carriages and proceed on foot with only the horses. He imbues his voice with mana so it can be heard over the storm. He turns his attention to a carriage, calling out to a woman named Adelia. He offers her his hand. She gratefully accepts his help, and he simply acknowledges it. Arwen checks on his well-being, but his focus is already elsewhere. He sees the rest of his escort struggling against the Gelforce winds. He orders Arwen to look after Adelia. He then turns to the bumbling knights, yelling at them to drop their shields. He explains that the shields are catching the wind, ordering them to discard all non-essential gear. The knights murmur amongst themselves, questioning the prince's combat experience and deciding there's no need to intervene. The march through the blizzard is grueling, each step a monumental effort. The prince and his companions pant, exhausted by the relentless storm. Suddenly, one of the knights collapses from exhaustion. Another knight calls out in alarm, informing the prince that a soldier has fallen behind. Without hesitation, the prince orders them to move aside. He easily hoists the fallen knight onto his shoulders. He then berates the stunned knights, demanding to know why they have stopped marching. Spurred on by his actions, the procession continues its arduous journey. As the hellish march finally nears its end, the prince remains resolute though clearly exhausted. The prince lets out a weary breath, cursing the blizzard's inconvenient timing. Just as suddenly the sky clears, revealing a massive fortress before them. A figure in black armor steps forward to greet them. He stands before the imposing castle gates. The banner of Balorhard flies high above the fortress. The man introduces himself as the rightful ruler of Balorhard and commander of the kingdom's 3rd Legion, welcoming the first prince. The prince offers a warm smile in return. The commander formally welcomes him to Winter Castle. This anti-monster fortress is located at the northernmost point of the kingdom, designed to block the creatures of the Blade Mountains. For ordinary soldiers, it is considered the worst duty station, a cold, harsh, and dangerous place with a low survival rate. For worldly nobles, Winter Castle is seen as both the Balorhard family's greatest weapon and their heaviest burden. The great gates creak open. The prince and the count look on. But for those born and raised in Balorhard, it is a place of lifelong duty and immense pride. The man, Vincent Balorhard, announces to his troops that he is ending his duties as acting commander. Count Balorhard welcomes his son back, commending him for his hard work. The prince smirks, feigning surprise that his uncle even had a son. The count retorts about his age, and the prince points out the stubborn resemblance between father and son. Count Balorhard then formally introduces his son, Vincent, to Prince Adrian. Vincent kneels, offering a formal greeting to His Highness. The prince offers a casual greeting in return. Vincent internally seethes, believing Winter Castle is a place for true warriors with noble convictions. He thinks it is no place for a scoundrel who was kicked out of the capital with women in tow. As a guard offers to guide the prince, Vincent internally questions why his father would bring such a person here. He immediately confronts his father, demanding to know what is happening. The count calmly explains that he has decided to become Adrian's guardian, and the prince will be staying with them for the time being. Vincent argues back, reminding his father that the prince is a nuisance cast aside by the king and a wretch whose lack of talent the count himself once criticized. The count simply states that people are bound to change as he watches the prince's party walk away. He then makes a single request of his son. He asks Vincent to observe the prince without prejudice, a request that clearly displeases the young commander. Count Balorhard convenes a meeting, inquiring about the progress of clearing out the monster settlements. Vincent reports that while they have made headway, several areas remain, and with his father's return, they can now proceed in earnest with the Ranger Battalion. The prince interjects, identifying the primary issue as the orcs. Vincent elaborates, explaining that a small but formidable group has settled near the mountain pass, too strong for the Rangers alone. He mentions that he is in the process of selecting knights for the task, as the prince listens with a knowing look. Suddenly, Prince Adrian reaches across the map. He picks up the piece representing the orcs, confidently declaring that he will handle the situation himself. The other commanders immediately voice their concerns, warning that these are no ordinary orcs and failure could jeopardize other operations. The prince ignores their protests, turning his attention directly to his uncle. Count Balorhard then asks his son for a precise assessment of the orcs' numbers and strength, leaving Vincent momentarily speechless. Vincent reports their confirmed numbers are at most 20, but they cannot rule out the presence of more powerful orc warriors or shamans. The count then asks the prince if he is truly confident in this endeavor. Vincent immediately objects, calling out to his father in protest. He argues that the mountain pass is a key ranger route, and failure would jeopardize future operations and the count's own position, all while the prince mocks his concern. Count Balorhard silences his son, telling him he has worried enough before asking the prince what he requires for the mission. The prince requests 3 guides, new equipment for his men, and any crossbows they can spare. The count agrees, stating that the request is not a difficult one to fulfill. Vincent can only watch, his face contorted in disbelief and frustration. Later, a knight captain is taken aback when the prince orders them to move out. He clarifies that they have received a mission to subjugate the orcs, relaying the intel about their numbers and the potential for stronger foes. The knight captain questions the order, reminding the prince that they are merely his escort, not a part of the 3rd Legion. The prince grins, explaining that this works out perfectly, as their duty to protect him means they must follow him into battle anyway. He walks away, ordering them to collect their new equipment and report back, leaving the knights to grumble in his wake. He internally resolves to make these soldiers useful, as they have been assigned to him regardless of his personal opinion. He recalls their unreliability in the blizzard, but acknowledges that as royal elites, their base stats are still decent. However, his gaze falls on one red-haired knight, whose traits of inquiry and disguise mark him as a suspicious outlier. Later, Vincent approaches the prince, confirming if he is one of the guides for the mission. He warns the prince of the dire consequences of failure, but Adrian confidently retorts that they will not fail, much to Vincent's frustration. The 2 men lock eyes, their opposing wills clashing before the assembled troops. The prince is unable to view Vincent's status window, leading him to wonder if his cousin is a powerful triple-chain knight. He assesses the guides, realizing only one is a true ranger while the others are knights in disguise. He smirks, understanding their plan to sideline him, but decides to overlook it for now. With his party assembled, he stands before the great gates, ready to depart. He reassures Adelia that she will not be joining them, internally worried about her trait blooming incorrectly. The group marches through the snowy wilderness, conserving as much stamina as possible. Vincent lectures him on the importance of careful footing in the treacherous mountains, a nagging the prince finds worse than his father's. Suddenly, a snow rabbit darts across their path, catching his attention. Vincent raises a spyglass, questioning the animal's appearance. Through the lens, he spots a group of orcs feasting in a blood-stained clearing. A close-up reveals a particularly menacing orc, its red eyes glowing with feral hunger. Vincent peers intently through the spyglass. He confirms the presence of orcs and asks the prince for his orders. The prince simply raises his hand. At his signal, the knights load their crossbows. One of the feasting orcs suddenly senses a disturbance. The prince calmly observes his targets from a distance. A familiar smirk crosses his face as he greets his old foes. He gives the silent command to fire. A volley of bolts tears through the unsuspecting orcs. With the initial volley fired, he charges into the fray. Prince Adrian holds his sword at the ready, his eyes locked on the enemy. He faces down a massive orc, which lets out a roar filled with killing intent. He springs forward. His eyes glow as a confident smirk spreads across his face. He cuts down the beast in a spray of blood. Blood drips from his blade onto the snow. He pants, a look of pure exhilaration on his face, finally feeling alive. He relishes the air of the battlefield as more orcs surround him. Arwen rushes to his side, warning him of the danger and urging him not to get any closer. But the prince remains perfectly calm, his grip firm on his sword. He warns Arwen that she might get swept up in his fight. His mind flashes back to a tale from over 400 years ago, when orcs were not mere monsters, but proud masters of the continent. This is not the story of a hero, but of one whose name was never recorded in history. It is the hymn of a pitiful man who hated orcs, a sorrowful dirge from a father who fought until his last breath. The fleeting verses of an extraordinary avenger, powerful enough to build a mountain of corpses. A red pond forms beneath his feet as he recites the hymn of revenge. Elsewhere, the suspicious red-haired knight expresses his fear of dying at Winter Castle, but is reassured he will not have to fight. His handler scoffs, questioning what the scoundrel prince could possibly accomplish, certain he will just hide and steal his uncle's achievements. He clarifies that the true target is not the prince, but the Balorhard family, ordering the knight to simply observe and report any suspicious movements. The red-haired knight nervously accepts the bag of coins for his service. The handler questions if the knight is truly capable of the task. The red-haired knight eagerly promises to do his best for the count of the royal court. But on the battlefield, he realizes everything he was told was a lie. He stares in horror at the monstrous orc, a creature far beyond what was described. A knight captain orders the first rank to maintain their square formation and advance. The orcs' club smashes through their defenses with ease. The red-haired knight panics, unsure of what he should do. In a desperate cry, he orders the second rank to attack and charges forward. But the beast effortlessly catches his spear, rendering his attack useless. As his weapon begins to splinter, he realizes they are all doomed. But just as he accepts his fate, a hand shoves his head down as a spear whistles past. Arwen leaps into action, her movements a blur of speed and precision. Her thrown spear impales the orc through the neck, saving the red-haired knight from certain death. He watches in stunned disbelief as the monstrous creature falls. His own weapon drops from the dead orc's grasp, landing at his feet. Arwen calmly lectures him, reminding him that a battlefield is no place to drop one's weapon. The red-haired knight gulps, stammering his agreement. Before them, the body of the slain orc lies in the snow, but a far greater threat now emerges. A horde of orcs, led by a horned chieftain, orders its troops to prepare for battle. Arwen grimly assesses the situation, realizing their numbers are too great to handle with their current forces. The prince's blade cleaves through another orc. The knights can only stare in disbelief. Even Arwen is taken aback by his ferocity. He stands over the corpse, his red aura blazing. He has carved a path of destruction through their ranks. He pants, the hymn's power coursing through him. Arwen calls out to him, her voice filled with worry. But the prince's focus is absolute. He lunges back into the fray without a moment's hesitation. The hymn recalls a warrior who felt that even this level of slaughter was not enough. The hymn tells of a warrior who cut down endless waves of orcs. But no amount of slaughter could ever quench his thirst for revenge. He sought only the blood of his enemies, and so he wandered the barren lands they ruled. He nimbly dodges a crushing blow, encounters with a fatal thrust. Another orc falls before him, its head severed from its body. The hymn explains that even when his mana ran dry, the warrior did not stop. He pushed his body far beyond its mortal limits, sustaining himself by consuming the blood and flesh of his foes. With every step, the warrior grew increasingly frail. The demonic sword in his hand was the only thing that sustained him. It burned his remaining life force for one final wish. He recalls the home where his family was slaughtered without a trace, a happy memory now stained by blood. His entire journey was a requiem for his wife and daughter. And finally, he stood before his lifelong enemy. But by then, he was already a wreck. He lets out a quiet, accepting sigh. The warrior's eyes glowed with malice as he made his final, desperate charge. He brought his sword down with all his remaining strength. He deflects a devastating blow from the orc chieftain. His expression remains grim and determined. The sheer force of the blow sends him reeling. The chieftain's fist shatters the ground below. But in the end, there was no miracle for the Avenger. He lies broken at the feet of his sworn enemy. However, the man refused to give up, even at the very end. His face shows a quiet acceptance of his fate. It was a story told to no one, a tale known by none. The sword was the only witness to the Avenger's final moments. And now, the prince is the only one who remembers it all. He snaps back to the present, surrounded by the bodies of the slain. A knight captain orders his men to engage the orc warriors, while the others hold off the main horde. The prince's grip tightens on his own blade. He remembers now. He realizes that the hymn of vengeance is incomplete, and he resolves that he must be the one to finish it. He unleashes a flurry of strikes, carving through the orc warriors. His eyes burn with a crimson light as he parries another blow. He stands his ground against the snarling beast. He becomes a whirlwind of red and steel, a dance of death among his enemies. A system notification confirms that a new verse has been added to the hymn of vengeance. The new verse speaks of piling up enough green corpses to raise a mountain, forming a red pond beneath. And standing before this scene of carnage, the prince honors the souls of the fallen, planting his sword in the chieftain's body as a final tribute. The hymn of vengeance has now evolved, becoming the hymn of requiems. He surveys the aftermath of his slaughter, as Vincent and the other knights look on in stunned silence. He snaps the orc's banner in two. Vincent raises the tattered flag, declaring the orcs have been annihilated. He proclaims their hard-fought victory to the surviving knights. The prince watches his cousin, recalling the man's name. He remembers it is Vincent Balorhard. He realizes that the heir to a monster-hunting family shares the same name as the pitiful Avenger from the hymn. The very same man who cast his life away, vowing to continue his hunt even in the next life. The prince reflects on the strange coincidence of their shared name and purpose.